heard before. All the detail seems to be old now and pretty familiar. Is there anything in there to excite you? Talking of which, what about the tantalising prospect to some, perhaps, of Nigel Farage merging with the Conservative Party, a Reform Conservative merger after a general election wipeout? If that happens, could the Conservative Party rise from the ashes like a phoenix with Nigel Farage at the helm? Is that the right thing for the country, or is that the wrong thing? Let me know. Get in touch with your opinions the usual ways. gbnews.com/your say. But before we get stuck into a meaty show, it's your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon to you. It's 3:02. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Rishi Sunak says Labour's election manifesto will mean the highest taxes in history. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled his party's key policies earlier, identifying wealth creation as the #1 priority and ruling out a return to austerity. Now, after he was briefly interrupted by a protester, Sir Keir rejected Rishi Sunak's allegations of higher taxes, insisting there would be no new rises under a Labour government other than those in their manifesto.
I don't believe it's fair to raise taxes on working people when they're already paying this much, particularly in a cost of living crisis. So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT. That is a manifesto commitment.
However, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt disagrees, describing it as a tax trap manifesto, and Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, disagrees with Labour's numbers, insisting Keir Starmer's promises will mean higher taxes.
This is Labour's tax trap manifesto. It only contains tax rises, no tax cuts. Under Labour's own published figures, it will take the tax burden to levels never seen before in this country. And that doesn't even include the £2,000 of taxes which they're going to levy on every working family across the country. So it's not actually so much what is in this manifesto, is what's not in this manifesto, because Labour have not ruled out taxing your home, your car, your pension. Everyone at home needs to be very, very clear. Their taxes will rise under Labour.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak's left the campaign trail to join world leaders at a three-day meeting of G7 nations in southern Italy. US President Joe Biden is urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and to encourage Hamas to accept a proposal backed by Israel. Leaders of the world's richest economies will also discuss the growing threat posed by Iran and funding for Ukraine in its war against Russia. One of Rishi Sunak's closest parliamentary aides is facing a gambling commission probe after he bet on when the general election would take place just 3 days before it was called. Craig Williams, who served as the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretary and is the Conservative candidate for Montgomeryshire and Glendower, admitted to putting a flutter on some weeks ago, but says he doesn't want what he's described as routine inquiries to distract from the campaign. The family of Harry Dunn have accused the US government of obstructing their son's inquest. The teenager was killed in 2019 when his motorcycle collided with a car driving on the wrong side of the road. Now, the driver, Anne Sakoulas, who was an employee of the US government, wasn't present at the four-day inquest, nor were any representatives of the US Embassy. Harry's mother, Charlotte, says her son's memory has been disrespected.
They've further disrespected Harry. They've disrespected the future that he could have had, and it just further bolsters my opinion that they have no regard for myself, my family, our wider family. They just don't care.
A childminder has been sentenced to more than 12 years in prison for the death of a 7-month-old baby. Harlow Collins died after being shaken by 63-year-old Karen Foster. The infant suffered severe brain injuries and was taken to hospital, but died several days later. Foster, who was found guilty of manslaughter, was a registered childminder, but had broken Ofsted rules over the number and ages of children that should have been in her care. Britain's welfare bill is expected to rise by more than £20 billion a year by the end of the next Parliament. A report from the Resolution Foundation found that's being driven almost entirely by pensioners and those with a health condition, with the overall cost of welfare bigger today than at the beginning of the financial crash in 2007. Spending on the state pensions grown the most, followed by disability and incapacity payments, while benefits not related to health or housing have fallen. Both main parties have committed to the triple lock pension rise, although Conservatives have pledged to cut spending by £12 billion per year. And Wizz Air has again been ranked as the worst airline for delays for a third consecutive year. The budget carrier's departures from UK airports were, on average, more than half an hour behind schedule last year, according to the Civil Aviation Authority. Turkish Airlines recorded the second worst punctuality last year, with TUI third. The Irish carrier Emerald Airlines was the best, with an average delay of 30 minutes, followed closely by Virgin Atlantic. More details on all of our stories available by scanning the QR code on your screen or going to the website gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, we've got so much to get through, so let's get cracking. And we start, of course, with Sir Keir Starmer, who today has launched Labour's Manifesto by saying he's not complacent ahead of next month's general election. Well, a GBNews People's poll this week put Labour a massive 20 points ahead of the Conservatives. And I'm joined now by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, welcome to the studio. We've had a massive drum roll. Today, the symbol crashed. The big announcement. What's new? The stuff that came out, we've heard about for weeks. We've heard about VAT on schools, non-dom taxation, overseas property investors getting clobbered, corporation taxes being capped, no increase on income tax, national insurance, VAT. Am I missing something? It seems to be stuff we've already heard before.
Well, we all knew that this manifesto was going to be a very sort of softly, gently approach. Keir Starmer has a almost completely clear path to number 10 at the moment. And the last thing he wants to do is announce some new unexpected policy which is going to upturn the apple cart and prevent him getting that super majority he's planning on. But I think this manifesto was even more sort of lacking in content than we were expecting. As you say, pretty much every single policy commitment had been pre-trailed, in some cases years ago. I mean, some of these promises Keir Starmer made when he first became leader of the opposition. I think what's interesting about it is when you look carefully at his tax promises, obviously Labour have promised over the last few years some pretty expensive things. Their wraparound childcare, their huge expansion of nursery places added on to primary schools, their supervised teeth brushing, all of these things, these cost money. And Keir Starmer has repeatedly said, and he said again this morning, that he will not be raising income tax, national insurance or VAT. But obviously, without some sort of financial miracle, some taxes will have to be raised or public spending will have to be cut. And I thought it was really interesting today how Keir Starmer, A, didn't rule out public spending cuts. He said that the Labour Party, won't be the party of austerity, but it does sound as though public spending cuts are on the horizon. But also, it became pretty clear that the Labour Party is planning tax rises. It might not be any of those three big taxes, but it will be almost certainly council tax rises, which can be very painful indeed. Fuel duty rises, which obviously there are many people who feel already that there's a war on motorists. Well, that could be about to get worse. And capital gains tax, so that's the tax on wealth. It'll be really interesting to see when Labour decides to implement those tax rises, because they are definitely coming.
And do you think this is part of the downside of being so far ahead? He doesn't have to do a big reveal. There doesn't have to be a massive golden globe on the table to make us drool. This is about not spooking the horses. He's been called Captain Cautious for this budget, this manifesto, beg your pardon, today. Jeremy Hunt's called it a tax trap manifesto. Well, that's a bit rich. They've been raising taxes to the highest level since World War II. Is the detail the stuff we're not seeing? For example, there's nothing in there about caps or sizes of immigration targets.
Well, exactly. And actually, Chris Hope, our political editor, asked Keir Starmer a question a little bit earlier. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Chris at GB News.
Chris Hope, GB News. Keir Starmer, you're so far ahead in the polls. Should we prepare for a one-party socialist state, as the Tories say? And is that a good thing? And also, just quickly, you want to reduce net migration. What on earth does that mean? Is that below 100,000 a year?
Look, Chris, let's reject the cynicism of the Tory campaign. All they want to do in a general election is to suppress the vote. I know that not a single vote has been cast in this election. Polls don't predict the future, and every single vote has to be earned. And we will earn it with our plan for growth, our plan for creation of wealth in the future.
Well, as you heard there was quite a lot of laughter about the idea of sort of one-party socialist state. But it does look very much as though Keir Starmer really could be heading for a super majority. And it would be really interesting to see what happens in Parliament if that were to happen, because we haven't really seen anything like that since 1997. And actually, some people are suggesting that Labour's majority this time around could be even bigger than 1997. What sort of policies will the Labour Party introduce that they're not mentioning yet if that supermajority comes to pass? As for the immigration question, well, Starmer forgot to answer it there. He did actually come back to it a little bit later, and I think we'll hear that in the next hour. Let's just say it wasn't the clearest answer I've ever heard.
And I also think that the big majority will allow them to do basically whatever they want. So we might not have any painful tax rises in this manifesto. Why would they do that? Why would they spook the electorate when they have victory so close to their grasp, but with a massive majority that would dwarf even Boris Johnson's majority? Then, Olivia, they could push through anything they wanted.
Well, exactly. And there are some places where the Labour Party, Rachel Reeves in particular, has tied her hands. I mean, it would be very difficult now for the Labour Party to raise any of those three main taxes. But there are lots and lots of areas where they have deliberately kept the canvas as blank as possible. They want to have free rein to do what they want if and when they come to power, and if they do get this super majority. And I think we should all be looking at what's going to happen with public spending, because interestingly, it does look a little bit as though Labour could be heading for the sort of public spending decisions that George Osborne and David Cameron made back in 2010.
Next up, Olivia Utley, always brilliant as usual. Now let's quickly cross over to the Tories responded to Labour's manifesto, and Chief Secretary to the Treasury Laura Trott says the Labour government would land the country with its biggest ever tax burden.
This is Labour's tax trap manifesto. It only contains tax rises, no tax cuts. Under Labour's own published figures, it will take the tax burden to levels never seen before in this country. And that doesn't even include the £2,000 of taxes which they're going to levy on every working family across the country.
So there we go, the Tories strike back. And let's talk to a man who was a Labour MP when they last produced an election-winning manifesto. That man is Stephen Pound. Stephen, welcome to the show. Always a delight. So you were there back in the glory days of Blairism and when there was a lot of money in the biscuit tin. Now, Stephen, we have a very, very different situation. The cupboard is bare. Old Mother Hubbard, Sir Keir Starmer, came out today. There's nothing new in this, but a lot of people are saying, is this supermajority the kind of tiger in the reeds, if you like? Will that give Sir Keir Starmer the power to push through any old tax rise he wants down the line?
Absolutely not. I mean, you're quite right, Mike. I was a Blair babe, and I was there at that time. And fair play to John Major, there was a few bob in the kitty at that particular time. But look, the key thing about this manifesto, what for me the overwhelming thing is it's actually one for the future. It's no good coming up with empty promises like Corbynite nonsense that we heard in the Conservative manifesto. We're going to actually, on the one hand, cut taxation, on the one hand, actually improve public services, when you can't do both. What's good about this is it's actually about increasing the size of the cake before we start slicing the cake up. Now, we've heard from Laura Trott that this absolute risible nonsense about the £2,000 over 4 years, which, as you know, anyone with a calculator would work out it's actually about 40 quid a year. And it simply isn't, the crushing blow that the Tories would like us to see. But look, what's big about this is, yes, it is as steady as she goes, a manifesto. I can't argue with that. And it was interesting that the manifesto launch was heckled, by a rabid Corbynite, because I think that just shows how far we've gone as a party. But look, the reality is we can't succeed in this country unless we have growth. Growth is the single most important thing. We can't spend anything until we've actually earned it first. It's a fairly basic principle that, in all honesty, Margaret Thatcher actually enunciated quite well. So this is about growth. And when I look at in the detail, the stuff for small business, the stuff about business rates, that to me is actually invigorating. It could actually save the high street, and we could actually improve our quality of life, because you've got to build from the bottom up. You can't simply say, as the Tories have said, we're going to slash taxes, but somehow, magically, mysteriously, on some strange alchemy, we're going to actually improve public services with less money. I'm sorry, that's for the birds.
And yet, Stephen, what's happened with the dreaded fiscal drag, of course, is that as wages have gone up, as inflation has gone up, more and more ordinary, hard-working people have been dragged into higher rate tax brackets. It's OK to cap taxes, but as sure as night follows day, more people will pay those higher taxes because inflation, just like death and taxes, is inevitable. And so, therefore, nurses, teachers, policemen, policewomen, they'll be dragged into top percent tax rates. That doesn't sound like a Labour government to me. That sounds like a Conservative government.
Martin. Like you, I weep for the tube train drivers. I weep for those RMP people who are going to be earning over 70 grand a year and are going to be dragged through this process that you quite accurately describe as fiscal drag. But look, to be honest, if somebody's earning an extra 20 grand a year and they pay an extra 4,000 grand a year on top of that, they're still £16,000 a year better off. I'm sorry. Fiscal drag is actually a sign of success of an economy. At the present time, we've got a race to the bottom, not a race to the top. But it's always good to hear you speak up for the plucky tube train drivers. Fair play to you.
No, not just the tube train drivers. I'm talking about nurses, policemen, policewomen, a lot of ordinary, hard-working people who never would consider themselves high-rate taxpayers, Stephen, are now finding themselves in that bracket because of inflation. And what I'm saying to you is that that isn't addressed in this manifesto today. It carries on. It steadies the ship. It's Jeremy Hunt's plan, but with a red rosette.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Martin. Look, the key thing here is that how do you actually reduce inflation? Quite simply by actually stressing instability. As you know, inflation is an aspect, it's a symptom of insecurity. It's a time when you don't have confidence in the economy, then people stop spending or they start investing in gold or paintings or God knows what. So if we actually manage to achieve some sort of stability, some economic fiscal stability in this country, then inflation will fall. And it's already falling at the moment. I mean, fair play to the people in the Treasury at the present time. So the idea that we have to actually throttle back on this whole policy of building from the bottom up and actually increase the economy because some people might end up paying more tax. I'm sorry, I just simply don't buy that. I think most people would actually say, do you know, I'd actually like to see a few police officers. I'd like to actually see my hospital working. I'd actually like to see, our streets kept clean. I'd actually like to see those improvements in public services. And the Tories have promised that. But at the same time, they said that they cut taxes. You can't do that. You simply can't square that circle. This is, sure, you can criticise this manifesto as a steady as she goes, steady as a ship one. But in all honesty, Martin, you've been there. You've been an elected, member of the European Parliament. You know the realities of this thing. You can't actually achieve anything unless you have that stability to start with. And you can't achieve stability unless you have the majority. And at the moment, it's ours to lose. The Labour Party is there. We could lose this. Well, of course we could. We're bloody good at losing elections. But in all honesty, this seems to be a sober, sensible, mature manifesto that I'm quite happy to sign up for. Although within 15 seconds of the manifesto being launched, I got a message from Conservative headquarters, from the Labour Party saying, can you make a contribution to our election fund? And I agreed. I think it's worth it for the country.
OK, Stephen Pound, one of the original Blair babes, matured like a fine wine. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you very much. Now, GBNews is, of course, the People's Challenge, so we went out and about in Bristol earlier to find out what voters think of Labour.
I'm confused by it all, and, just because, obviously, what they say and what they do are normally two complete things. It just makes you sceptical about everything that's kind of committed to. So I'm kind of, probably like most people, just frustrated about the whole thing, really. But there you go.
I haven't read it in detail. I have a fair idea what it contains. I don't think there's anything outstanding, anything out of the ordinary. I don't honestly think the manifestos are really worth reading because I don't think they'll tell you a great deal about what's going to happen if the party gets into power.
I don't think that it makes any difference. I mean, we're in a terrible state. Whatever they put forward, it has to be better to what we've got now. Whether they achieve it, as I say, is the question.
There we go, Bristol Speaks. Now, I'll have lots more on the Labour manifesto, of course, throughout the show. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, it's time now for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to make this summer really sing with over 16 grand's worth of prizes to be won. That's 15 grand, tax-free cash and a whole host of goodies on top. Now, you've got to be in it to win it. Here's all the details that you need.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The UK has announced 50 new sanctions aimed at Putin and Russia's war machine, but will they make any difference whatsoever? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Used directly on the floor. Inspired by patented Octaspring aerospace technology, this topper could transform your old and uncomfortable bed into the bed of your dreams. And in this special offer, you'll be saving 20%. The Octasmart Essentials topper is available for only £99. So call or go online right now for this low price offer. There are 3 great reasons why.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
I've got a grade 3 astrocytoma brain tumour. Once I was diagnosed, I tried to do my claim with my insurance company and was rejected. They then also cancelled my life insurance and also cancelled my wife's policies as well.
And this is Zurich Insurance, John.
This is Zurich,
and their point was, because you'd had some dizzy spells, which you hadn't told them about, they say dizzy spells equates to a brain tumour, which there's no evidence to support that.
I was with King's College Hospital. They ignored them. King's College Hospital were the experts.
And you were expecting £25,000?
Yeah, that was a critical illness claim.
Critical illness, because you've got a critical illness. Clearly, it couldn't be more critical, could it?
No.
Michelle, you've got a lovely poorly husband, and you're also worrying about paying the bills and what the future holds.
Yeah.
What impact is this having on you on a day-to-day basis?
I try not to think too much about the future because it does upset me. I'm kind of thinking, when John does go, I'm left with a mortgage to pay and 2 young children.
How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Right.
Yeah. So it's incredibly tough.
And are you working?
I haven't worked since having the children.
Right.
And that's a decision we made when we had children.
In the grand scheme of things, this amount of money is a drop in the ocean for a company like Zurich.
Yes, because I think they could make all this go away.
I've read some of the statement. Zurich statement, we're sorry to hear of the very difficult circumstances Mr. Rendler's family are experiencing. You're terminally ill, and they're calling that difficult circumstances.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:26. Now, Labour's not the only party that launched its manifesto today. So has Plaid Cymru. The party's leader, Rhyn ap Iorwerth, has called for more funding and economic fairness for Wales.
Common thread which runs through this manifesto is fairness. Firstly, fair funding for Wales. Plaid Cymru is the only party advocating for the abolition of the Barnett's formula, which has seen Wales lose out to the tune of billions of pounds now over the years. It's not a begging bowl. It's just doing what's right, enabling investment in public services and in the economy. Even Lord Barnett himself, the architect of that formula back in 1978, when I was that size, said that it had passed its sell-by date many years ago.
Wow, an end to the Barnett formula. That's a nice handout from Westminster to Wales every year. Well, there we go. So throughout the election campaign, we're hearing from people across the UK about what really matters to them. Issues such as NHS waiting lists, immigration impact, the cost of living crisis, crime and policing. And our reporters have been out to meet voters from all four nations, and we'll hear from them regularly before polling day on July the 4th. And today, we hear from Murray.
I'm Murray Hecht, I'm 50 years old, I live in Brighton. The issues that are important to me are anti-Semitism, social care and education. In the past, I was a staunch Labour voter. I was a member of the Labour Party. That all changed in the Corbyn era when anti-Semitism reared its ugly head, and I became, I suppose, what you would call a floating voter. To vote for Keir Starmer, I'd like to hear from him that he's going to curb these marches that happen every week in London, that he's going to listen to Jewish people and what their fears are and take it seriously and show us that he's actually going to do something rather than paying lip service and not doing anything really. My job is, at the moment, I'm a full-time carer for my mother who's housebound and disabled. There's your tea, Mum. And I want to see things improve for her and also carers. I have to survive on £81 a week, which is nothing. So I'd like to see an overhaul of the carers allowance and also more care for people who need it. I have a dilemma for who I'm going to vote for. I haven't fully decided because I've got to weigh up the pros and cons. Obviously, I'm thinking about social care and the issues that are close to my heart. And I know that the Conservatives haven't had a great track record with this for the last however many years, 14 years that they've been in power. So I've got to weigh up, do I vote for Labour with the anti-Semitism? Do I vote for Conservatives who I know are going to cause problems with social care and my personal situation? So it is a real dilemma for me at the moment.
You know, I absolutely love these people's voices. We do them every day. I was elected 5 years ago and I spent so much time talking to voters, and their stories are fascinating. It just goes to show how complex it is to try and please everybody. How can the Labour Party please the growing voice of the pro-Palestine sentiment, those Muslim politicians demanding ceasefires in Gaza, at the same time keeping people like Murray happy, who are very concerned with some justification about rising anti-Semitism on our streets? He wants the Labour Party to stamp down on the pro-Palestine marches, but how on earth can they do that while keeping the more radical left and that Muslim vote happy? So many plates are being spun during this general election. And what will we see after the election if, and all indications are, there'll be a massive Labour Party majority? What will those people who back the party demand, particularly that pro-Palestine Muslim vote? What will they be asking for? I don't think that people like Murray will be getting what they want. I don't think they'll be calling for an end to those marches any time soon. Keep your thoughts coming in. What do you think about these marches? Is that an impact? Are there little bits and pieces that put you off making that leap to parties? We are, all of us now, politically promiscuous, politically homeless oftentimes. I think that's a good thing. I think every single vote should be fought for. What will get your vote? Let me know. GBNews.com/your say. Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. Later in the show, I discuss Nigel Farage's claim that he would be willing to lead a merged Reform Conservative Party alliance in the future. Does that get your juices flowing? But first, it's your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak says Labour's election manifesto will mean the highest taxes in history. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled his party's key policies today, identifying wealth creation as the #1 priority and ruling out a return to austerity. After he was briefly interrupted by a protester, Sir Keir rejected Rishi Sunak's allegations of higher taxes, insisting there would be no new rises under a Labour government other than those in their manifesto. The family of Harry Dunn have accused the US government of obstructing their son's inquest. The teenager was killed in 2019 when his motorcycle collided with a car that was driving on the wrong side of the road. The driver, Anne Sekulas, who was an employee of the US government, wasn't present at the 4-day inquest, nor were there any representatives of the US Embassy. Harry's mother, Charlotte, says her son's memory has been disrespected. Rishi Sunak has left the campaign trail to join world leaders at a meeting of G7 nations in southern Italy. US President Joe Biden is urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and encourage the Hamas terror group to accept a proposal backed by Israel. Leaders of the world's richest economies will also discuss the growing threat posed by Iran and funding for Ukraine in its war against Russia. And a new study has found the final episode of Neighbours caused fans to experience grief. Dr. Adam Garris from the College of Psychology in Adelaide surveyed 1,300 fans of the Australian soap opera. He found people experienced emotions normally associated with the death of a loved one. The series ran for 37 years before it was cancelled, though it's since been revived by Amazon. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2772 and €1.1842. The price of gold is £1,809.60 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,158 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Don't forget, this is your show as much as mine, so please send your comments and your views in. And if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, and we're Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's still some queues on the westbound M62 around Huddersfield. The turn-off at junction 23. All the lanes are back open, though. That follows an earlier collision. Now, the Leeds Road in Bradford, the A647, still shut between the A6177 and Thornbury Road. Is due to an earlier building fire. Issues for the Stamford Road in Stafford-le-Hope in Essex, the A1013. It's shut between the bypass, the A13 and London Road in Kewing. That's due to a collision. Now, queues northbound up the M3. Basingstoke South, junction 7 up to junction 6. Obstruction on the road currently being removed, all the traffic being held to Natural East Building. And between Fletchwood Road in Netley Marsh in Hampshire and the Foxhills turn off in Taunton, the A326 still closed off both ways for investigation work. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
D-Day was shrouded in secrecy. Ken Hay was days away from landing in Normandy and still didn't know what was happening.
I don't think we really appreciated what we were going into. Actually, on D-Day, I was on a 30-mile route march, and we see the planes going over and that sort of thing. And we realised that wherever they were going, then we got the news that, in fact, it was Normandy, and we knew we were scheduled for that.
He arrived on Juno Beach at Coursieux-sur-Mer a few days after the main assault. The soldiers' role was to push forward into enemy territory.
I didn't land on D-Day. I landed shortly after in June. I was in the infantry, so I was a rifle and I was up the front.
While on night patrol on July 7th, his unit was attacked.
My brother was a corporal in the same platoon, and he was out with me. He got back. 16 of us out of 30 got back. 5 of us got captured, and 9 got killed.
Germans put him to work in a POW camp in Zabas, Poland. With Soviets advancing, the prisoners were forced to march for 1,000 miles.
At one point along there, my leg was chopped. I lay down in the snow. If it hadn't been for 2 guys who fell back in the column and picked me up, I'd have just gone to sleep and frozen to death. 2 American tanks turned up on the 22nd of April, Sunday afternoon, and we were liberated.
Ken feels pride for the role he played in Normandy and thanks God for keeping him alive.
People say, why did you volunteer for the services? It was a completely different atmosphere then. You did your bit.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:37. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, I discuss Nigel Farage's claim that he would be willing to lead a merged Reform Conservative party in the future. Now, and yet more concerning news for our shrinking armed forces as bosses have caught over 3,000 Army, Navy and RAF personnel using cocaine in the last 5 years, which would be big enough to make up 4 combat-ready battalions. Now, the wider numbers are even more concerning, with 4,160 facing the boot from the armed forces for drug use, with cannabis and ecstasy also regularly being found in drug tests. And I'm joined now by the former British Army officer and defence analyst, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. Stuart, always a delight to have you on the show. Now, the headline writers are having fun. They're saying this is the marching powder, squaddies on the sniff, but it's not a laughing matter. A lot of young people in this country are turning to drug use. Soldiers, armed forces people, it appears they're no different. What's going on?
Well, good afternoon, Martin. I think really you've hit the nail on the head there, that if we remember that the armed forces of all 3 services recruit from the civilian population, and drug use of that sort is rife in the civilian society, then it reflects itself in the armed forces. Now, that is not to condone it in any way, because I can think of no more lethal combination than a couple of snorts of cocaine and a high-powered rifle. But I dare say that if you were to drug test those who work at Canary Wharf and in the city, and indeed in some media organisations, the results might be much, much worse. So I think we've got to take it as being unfortunate, not the sort of thing that we want in the armed services, but it does reflect wider society from which the armed forces recruit.
Yeah, I mean, there was a slight wry, sideways smile from myself when journalists in the tabloids are getting a bit pious about extracurricular activities, shall we say, and I can see you share my smile there, Stuart Crawford.
Indeed,
but nevertheless,
indeed, I just wondered whether perhaps the BBC and ITN and maybe even GB News have a sort of mandatory drug test on a Monday morning. I think the results would be quite shocking.
I wouldn't know about that. But the fact of the matter is, as you said, we're not in command of rifles. We're not in command of tanks, of explosives, of things that can cause harm. So in that respect, we can brush this aside by saying, well, this is just a wider reflection of British society. But should people in the armed forces be held to a higher standard?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that's a fair point. I think they should, because of the nature of the job they do. But I dare say we have to be aware of the temptations if you're stationed in Aldershot or Tidworth or Warminster or somewhere like that, and you get away at the weekend down to the local pubs and clubs, then it's going to be there, and the temptation to partake in it is all present. It's omnipresent. The drug of choice of the armed forces over the years, of course, has been alcohol. And when I served in Germany in the 1980s, we consumed Herculean amounts of alcohol, both inside the barracks and when out on our tanks on exercise. So I'm not going to get too pious about it, but I do think that it's something that we would want to discourage very strongly.
Yeah, there's something that raises the eyebrows about being tanked up while in control of a tank. Even if it is just on an exercise, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, that's a bit of an eye raiser. What should be done? I mean, are we at the point where we are going to have zero tolerance? We do see that in some organisations. Is that a tad too heavy-handed, would you believe, for the armed forces?
I think it's. I mean, I wouldn't think it's a tad too heavy-handed. It's the question is how is it applied, and if there were, for example, everybody returning to camp after a weekend had to go through some sort of drug testing regime as they came back into barracks, I think that would do a little bit to alleviate what is a concerning matter. But the other thing is, of course, people will always discover some other way to enjoy themselves recreationally, and it really is a case of trying to get ahead of the game. I don't think it can be stopped absolutely, but it can be discouraged very much so, and that's what's going on at the moment, I hope.
And Stuart, without again trying to in any way justify any of this behaviour, when we look at men and women who are in situations where it's life or death, where they are existing in a very, very heightened state of their own mortality, of danger, of preparedness, that's an incredibly stressful job, something that few of us on Civvy Street can ever hope to imagine. And so blowing off steam might have been a few pints back in your day. Is that a part of the makeup? Does it attract people who are drawn towards taking risks, towards danger? And that might mean there's some backdrop, some prevalence perhaps to be drawn towards this.
Well, I think that's definitely an element of it. Quite a lot of people, of course, join the armed forces to get a skill or a trade, which is a part and parcel of the whole military process. And I dare say the police and the fire service, for example, are more frequently presented with challenging situations than the armed forces tend to be. So I don't know what the comparison data is like. I don't know what the statistics are like. But, I mean, I wouldn't make any excuses for it, except to say it does happen. And I think we've got to be really grown up and adult and realise it happens and try and mitigate both the results of it and also discourage the use of such substances.
I also wonder, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, if a lot of this is boredom. A lot of these young people sign up to have a purpose, to go into an arena of combat, and during times of peace, perhaps there are simply too many idle hours. Anyway, we could talk about this all day, but we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. As ever, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, always a delight. Thank you very much. Now, about to get more Tory reaction to Labour's manifesto, and I'll ask him, is a Labour election win now simply inevitable? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update here on GB News. From the Met Office, wet weather is spreading its way across most areas today. Pretty gusty too, especially so in the west. And here's the reason why: low pressure ambling in from the Atlantic. The isobars really squeezing together across Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest gusts are. The rain is tracking east. Parts of eastern England still dry at the moment, but the rain will move in here through this evening. And eventually, maybe not till after dark, we'll see that rain cropping up in northern Scotland too. Elsewhere, it should turn a little drier as we go through the second half of the night. And it's going to be a much, much milder night than recent nights. Temperatures in towns and cities holding up in double figures. It is, though, going to be a bit of a wet start to Friday across northern Scotland, so a very different day to come here compared to today. Soggy conditions, pretty brisk easterly wind as well. Showers packing into western parts of Scotland. The southeast of Scotland may well start dry and bright with some sunshine. Mixture of sunshine and showers to come for Northern Ireland during Friday, and plenty more showers to come across northern England and Wales as well. But a good part of the Midlands and eastern England should start Friday dry and, as I said, quite a bit warmer than recent mornings. Still quite breezy along the south coast, and as we go through the morning, the clouds will bubble up and the showers will get going. One of those days where 1 minute you're caught in a heavy downpour, the next minute the sun is out. So a really changeable day. The brisk breeze means the showers should zip along, but they will be quite heavy when they do come along. Between the showers, though, quite a bit of sunshine and temperatures creeping up a little bit, back closer to the average for June, maybe up to 20 in 1 or 2 places. Still plenty of showers to come and go as we go through Friday evening, so bear that in mind if you're heading out. More wet weather working into Northern Ireland at the same time, all circulating around a big area of low pressure that is sticking around for the weekend. So sunshine at times, lots more heavy showers to come on Saturday and Sunday. Goodbye.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This Saturday, GB News invites you to witness the pageantry, the tradition and the unity. Join Ellie Costello and me, Andrew Pearce, in a celebration of His Majesty the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour, Saturday at 10 a.m. on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:48. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, let's get more reaction now to the Labour Manifesto, which was launched, of course, this morning. We're joined now by the Conservative candidate, Nick Fletcher. Nick, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So they're calling him Captain Cautious. What's your response to Sir Keir's manifesto? This is meant to be the future vision of the country. Over to you.
It seems to be an awful lot of consultations from what I've seen so far, and obviously tax increases, which we know that's exactly what the Labour Party are about. And I hope the country is not going to be hoodwinked by this. It's what politicians from the Labour Party always do. They always leave us with higher debt, they always leave us with greater taxes, and they always leave us with fewer people being employed. And I hope people can remember what's happened in the past. And I hope people can see what's happening in Wales right at this moment in time with the longest NHS list in the country. I'm on the doors of people. There's no love out there for Sir Keir Starmer or the Labour Party. And they want a party that's going to control their borders, going to be careful with their money because they know it's hard-earned. And they want a country that's going to be proud of itself. And that's exactly what this Conservative Party is all about.
But, Nick, it's fair and well to say there are going to be tax rises under Sir Keir Starmer. There have been 27 straight tax rises under the Conservative Party. We've got the highest taxes since World War II. And everyone remembers that note that Liam Byrne left for David Cameron, there's no money left. Well, we were 97 billion in debt. Now we're 2.8 trillion in debt. The debt has been trebled under the Conservative Party. Do you not think it's the case of glass houses and throwing stones?
When we came into power in 2010, the national deficit was £158 billion. Just before COVID in 2019, we got that down to £38 billion. And then obviously we've had COVID, and the day all the restrictions were lifted from COVID, we've got straight into the Putin invading Ukraine.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to come out of that. Nick Fletcher, you sounded like you'd morphed into a Dalek. I think it'd be a good idea, perhaps, to get some better broadband in the area. But look, the point is this that I want to make is that everybody is saying that the other party is going to be worse. Tax rises are inevitable under the Labour Party. Well, we have so many tax rises under the Conservatives. Now, they can blame COVID, they can blame the war in Ukraine. We might have questioned both of those things. What about if we weren't quite so rampant in locking down? By the way, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party both wanted that. In fact, the Labour Party willed them on sooner, harder and longer. Things might have been worse if the Labour Party had been in power. Today, did enough come out to convince you that the Labour Party can be trusted on tax? Undeniably, Sir Keir Starmer has done a lot of work to try and massage the demons of Corbynism away from the party. In fact, to be fair to him, he was heckled today. There we can see it. He was heckled by somebody from the socialist left who doesn't recognise this party. Sir Keir Starmer responded saying we're a party of progress. What he meant by that is if we were behaving like that young woman there waving the flag, the Corbynista, they wouldn't be anywhere near power. And yet, there is the spectre of future tax rises. Last night, when Percy said, it's not my plan to raise taxes, it's on the manifesto to raise taxes. But do you worry that with that super majority, that even Grant Shapps, even the Conservatives are saying it's coming with a massive majority to dwarf perhaps even that of Boris Johnson's, they could push through any legislation they wanted. Do you worry that there is a red under the bed in the form of massive tax rises, despite what Sir Keir Starmer says on Manifesto launch day, despite what he says in very highly polished media performances? Now then, let's have a bit of fun, because we all came together and shed a tear even, when Rishi Sunak announced he had a difficult childhood and it was so tough that he didn't even have Sky TV. Well, it brought the people who use Twitter, or X as people now call it, together, but not in sympathy, but to majestically poke fun at him. Let's have a look at a few of these now. Now, one person referred to Band-Aid with Sting, Bono and Simon Le Bon tearfully singing, and there won't be Sky TV in Winchester this Christmas time. The Prime Minister was mocked up as Oliver Twist, asking, please, sir, can I have Sky TV? Another had an image of a young Rishi Sunak burning dollar notes, saying he was killing time while waiting for Sky TV to be invented. There he is in his school blazer, setting fire to money because he can't afford Sky TV. And finally, the poster for ET, which was changed to OT, only terrestrial. See, when we come together like this and we mock and we take the mickey, this, I believe, is Britain at its best. And don't worry, we've also done the same for Ed Davey and Sir Keir Starmer next. Talking of which, Sir Keir Starmer has unveiled Labour's manifesto. Stand by to find out what he said and didn't say on immigration. We ask him the big questions on GB News. I'm Martin Daubney. First, it's your weather with Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update here on GB News. From the Met Office, wet weather is spreading its way across most areas today. Pretty gusty too, especially so in the west. And here's the reason why: low pressure ambling in from the Atlantic. The isobars really squeezing together across Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest gusts are. The rain is tracking east. Parts of eastern England still dry at the moment, but the rain will move in here through this evening, and eventually, maybe not till after dark, we'll see that rain cropping up in northern Scotland too. Elsewhere, it should turn a little drier as we go through the second half of the night, and it's going to be a much milder night than recent nights. Temperatures in towns and cities holding up in double figures. It is, though, going to be a bit of a wet start to Friday across northern Scotland, so a very different day to come here compared to today. Soggy conditions, pretty brisk easterly wind as well. Showers packing into western parts of Scotland. The southeast of Scotland may well start dry and bright with some sunshine. Mixture of sunshine and showers to come for Northern Ireland during Friday, and plenty more showers to come across northern England and Wales as well. But a good part of the Midlands and eastern England should start Friday dry and, as I said, quite a bit warmer than recent mornings. Still quite breezy along the south coast, and as we go through the morning, the clouds will bubble up and the showers will get going. One of those days where 1 minute you're caught in a heavy downpour, the next minute the sun is out. So a really changeable day. The brisk breeze means the showers should zip along, but they will be quite heavy when they do come along. Between the showers, though, quite a bit of sunshine and temperatures creeping up a little bit, back closer to the average for June, maybe up to 20 in 1 or 2 places. Still plenty of showers to come and go as we go through Friday evening, so bear that in mind if you're heading out. More wet weather working into Northern Ireland at the same time, all circulating around a big area of low pressure that is sticking around for the weekend. So sunshine at times, lots more heavy showers to come on Saturday and Sunday. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The westbound M62 still struggling towards and past the Huddersfield turn-off junction 23. Lane 1 still combed off at the scene of an earlier collision. But there was a breakdown clockwise on the M60 around the Trafford Centre junction 10. All lanes are open, but still quite slow going. On northbound M6, all the traffic being held around Stafford, junction 13 up to 14 to sort out a collision between a lorry and a car, so that's starting to queue. Leicestershire, the A50 westbound Cavendish Bridge is blocked between Long Eaton through towards junction 2 for the A6. That's the Derby turn-off. There's been a multi-vehicle collision that's causing queues. And the coastbound M20 in Kent, Leeds Castle at 8 towards Ashford junction 9. There's an ongoing issue there, so once again all the traffic being held. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Stump.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Today, Sir Keir Starmer has launched Labour's Manifesto and said he's not complacent about election victory despite his absolutely massive lead in the polls. Now, if the Tories are thrashed on July the 4th, as looks most likely, will they join forces with Reform UK? Well, Nigel Farage today has sensationally revealed that he would be willing to lead a merged Reform Conservative Party. Would that float your boat? And here's a sight for sore eyes. Sir Ed Davey was given a makeover live on ITV television this morning. To me, Looks a bit like Hannibal Lecter. And that's all coming between now and 6 o'clock. You know, say what you like about Ed Davey, we're talking about the guy. He's either falling off a paddleboard, wearing a Panama hat. They even said to him, can you believe this, on ITV Today, clench your buttocks, please, Ed. And he looked over his shoulder in a way that I don't want to see from a political party leader. But we're talking about him. Has he got your vote? And what about this Labour manifesto today? In my opinion, there's nothing in it. We haven't heard for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's been slammed by the Conservatives as Captain Cautious. But is there something more sinister lurking there? Could there be a supermajority that would allow Sir Keir Starmer to start cranking up those taxes? I'll be joined by a Labour minister very soon. I'll be putting that to her with my colleague Olivia Utley. Now, get in touch. What do you make of today's manifesto? Anything in there to float your boats? Could Ed Davey sway you with his Panama hats? Get in touch. gbnews.com/your say. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak says Labour's election manifesto will mean the highest taxes in history. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled his party's key policies today, identifying wealth creation as the #1 priority and ruling out a return to austerity. After he was briefly interrupted by a protester, Sir Keir rejected Rishi Sunak's allegations of higher taxes, insisting there would be no new rises under a Labour government other than those in the manifesto.
I don't believe it's fair to raise taxes on working people when they're already paying this much, particularly in a cost of living crisis. So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT. That is a manifesto commitment.
But Chancellor Jeremy Hunt called it a tax trap manifesto, while Chief Secretary to the Treasury Laura Trott said Labour's numbers would mean higher taxes.
This is Labour's tax trap manifesto. It only contains tax rises, no tax cuts. Under Labour's own published figures, it will take the tax burden to levels never seen before in this country. And that doesn't even include the £2,000 of taxes which they're going to levy on every working family across the country. So it's not actually so much what is in this manifesto, is what's not in this manifesto, because Labour have not ruled out taxing your home, your car, your pension. Everyone at home needs to be very, very clear. Their taxes will rise under Labour.
The Liberal Democrats have described Labour's manifesto as a gamble on economic growth that fails to set out how wealth will be shared more evenly. Sir Ed Davey was taking part in an assault course near Royal Tunbridge Wells in Kent this afternoon. He said that trickle-down economics will not fix broken Britain, and only his party has a plan to revive the NHS.
Need to have serious investment in health and care. We're suggesting £9 billion of investment to rescue our NHS, and we're talking about investment to help the poorest in our society. And we want to make sure that we've got the capital investment, in social homes, in the fight against climate change, and making sure the nature crisis is dealt with. So we have an ambitious policy package in the Liberal Democrats, and on top of that, we're the only party saying we need to reform our politics. The political system in our country is broken, and it's only the Liberal Democrats who are saying how we would fix that.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak left the campaign trail today to join world leaders at a meeting of G7 nations in southern Italy. US President Joe Biden is urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and encourage the Hamas terror group to accept a proposal backed by Israel. Leaders of the world's richest economies are also discussing the growing threat posed by Iran and funding for Ukraine in its war against Russia. One of Rishi Sunak's closest parliamentary aides is facing a gambling commission probe after he bet on when the general election would take place just 3 days before it was called. Craig Williams, who served as the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretary and is the Conservative candidate for Montgomeryshire and Glendower. He admitted to putting a flutter on some weeks ago, but doesn't want what he called routine inquiries to distract from the campaign. The family of Harry Dunn have accused the US government of obstructing their son's inquest. The teenager was killed in 2019 when his motorcycle collided with a car that was driving on the wrong side of the road. The driver, Anne Sakoulas, who was an employee of the US government, wasn't present at the 4-day inquest, nor were there any representatives of the US Embassy. Harry's mother, Charlotte, says her son's memory has been disrespected.
They've further disrespected Harry. They've disrespected the future that he could have had, and it just further bolsters my opinion that they have no regard for myself, my family, our wider family. They just don't care.
And a new study has found the final episode of Neighbours caused fans to experience grief. Dr. Adam Gerrars from the College of Psychology in Adelaide surveyed 1,300 fans of the Australian soap opera, and he found people experienced emotions normally associated with the death of a loved one. The series ran for 37 years before it was cancelled, though it has since been revived by Amazon. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, we've got so much to get through, so let's get cracking. And we start, of course, with Sir Keir Starmer, who has launched Labour's Manifesto today by saying he's not complacent ahead of next month's general election. Now, a GB News People's poll this week, but Labour a massive 20 points ahead of the Conservatives. And to talk about that, I'm now joined by the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. Bridget, thank you for joining us on the show. Always a delight to have your company. So, with a massive drum roll that lasted weeks, today the symbol crashed and we basically heard what we knew was coming. Not a great deal in there to surprise us, being called Captain Cautious, but is it actually Captain Comatose? Is this a manifesto designed to just put the electorate to sleep, to not scare anybody, to get a massive majority, and then we'll see the true Labour Party? There have been rumours that as soon as you get in, there will be socialist-style tax hikes. What's your response?
Good afternoon. Today we set out a manifesto that is a really ambitious programme for the change that our country needs. And to precisely your point on tax, what we've said and what Keir said very clearly today is that under Labour there will be no increases in income tax, national insurance or VAT. We think that the tax burden on working people is already too high. And our focus, if we form that next government, will be on growing our economy so that we've got well-paid, highly skilled jobs in every corner of our country. The route out of the doom loop that we've got ourselves into is to grow our economy and to use that as the means by which we can invest in our public services. But as a down payment on that, we have set out changes that we would make so that we can cut NHS waiting times, get more police on our streets and get more teachers into our classrooms.
But Bridget, Jeremy Hunt came up with a really nice ruse called fiscal drag. You're not putting taxes up, but inflation goes up, wages go up, and so ordinary hard-working people, nurses, police people, they get dragged into higher rate taxes. And that's something which I think the Labour Party has looked at and goes, oh, yeah, we'll have a bit of that. So not putting taxes up doesn't help people. They still find themselves in higher tax bracket. The Labour tax policy is the same as Jeremy Hunt's.
Look, we want taxes to be going down on working people and not up, as they have done consistently under the Conservatives. But everything that we've set out in our manifesto today is fully funded and fully costed, because we've seen in recent times what comes when you have a government that doesn't have a focus on the public finances, that plays fast and loose with the public finances, as they did under Liz Truss. And that has had catastrophic results for working people who are paying more on their rent and on their mortgage every single month because of those choices that people like Jeremy Hunt, like Liz Truss, like the Conservatives made. And it is working people who pay the price. And I do think Jeremy Hunt's got a bit of a cheek, really. It's the Conservatives that have hiked the tax burden to the highest rate it's been for 70 years. We want to make sure that we're growing our economy so that we can make sure that working people are not having to foot the bill time and again.
OK, Bridget, I'm joined in the studio by my colleague Olivia Utley. She'd like to fire a question at you.
Your flagship education policy, as far as I can tell, is this 3,000 new school-based nurseries. Can you just confirm here on the show that those will be new nurseries as opposed to expanding places, nurseries that already exist? Because you seemed a bit confused about that the other day.
Yes, they're new settings. So the reason we're able to do this is because with their spaces opening up because of the falling birth rate that we're seeing and falling pupil numbers coming through primary school. So at the moment, there are 600,000 spare primary places. We would use the space that has been opened up to create new nursery settings, to create 100,000 new childcare places, which parents right across our country are desperate to see happen.
Bridget, I know your background. You come from humble working class background, just like myself. You're going to be the Education Secretary pretty soon, if all goes according to plan. What about addressing the elephant in the room that no Education Secretary has had the guts to tackle in the past 25 years, and that is white working class pupils at the bottom of the stack, particularly young boys? Hasn't been a single initiative to help them out there because of the fear it looks racist, it's not politically correct, but the data is the data. Could you promise to the electorate, to the voters, to the viewers watching today that you'll do something about this forgotten, this betrayed demographic?
I want to make sure, if I'm Education Secretary in that next Labour government, that we do absolutely everything that we can to make sure that background doesn't determine what you can go on to achieve. And sadly, for too many young people in our country, background is destiny, and it shouldn't be, and it doesn't need to be that way. And that's why I will have a real focus on driving up standards in our schools, on making sure we've got apprenticeships for our young people alongside high quality university courses, and that we reform technical education too, and make sure our colleges are able to create those brilliant jobs that I know lots of young people would want the opportunity to benefit from. So yes, absolutely, a real focus on underachievement, on making sure that we're narrowing those gaps that exist, which are widening at the moment, particularly where it comes to young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds. Education transformed my life. It made such a difference to me, and I want a brilliant education for all of our children.
And yet, Bridget, there are so many barriers to people from backgrounds like yours, background like mine. You know, forget about being a toolmaker's son. I'm a coal miner's son. I was the only first person in my family to go to university. That's at a time when university grants were free for people on my mother and father's income. Now the barriers to working class people in Britain are massive. They're priced out of the market by foreign students who pay much, much more. There is definitely a feeling, Bridget Phillipson, that the British working classes are left behind. I just want to press you on this because so many people watching this channel are crying out for somebody who will help people like them.
Absolutely, and I get it. You know, I grew up in a council street in the northeast of England near Sunderland. We had to really push for everything that we were able to get. I've had to work really hard in order to get to university, to have the kind of opportunities that I've been able to enjoy. And I was really well supported by brilliant teachers and by a family that valued education and pushed me to succeed. And I want that for all children. And no, you're right, this is not easy. This is a big, big structural challenge that we face. And I don't think it's enough that there should be one or two lucky people like you or I who have the chance to succeed and others are left behind. I want dignity and security for everyone. And that involves training opportunities, well-paid jobs, and the chance to go to university if that's what the young person is able to achieve.
Just one more question for me. England has risen up the PISA rankings in the whole world for reading and mathematics too in the time that the Conservatives have been in power. There are some major reforms that the Conservatives have made to schools and the curriculum that seem to be succeeding. Would you want to overturn those, or would you keep a lot of the Tory school policy in place?
I do believe we need to look again at curriculum and assessment in our schools, and if we win the next election, there'll be a full expert-led review of curriculum and assessment to make sure that our young people are well prepared for life, work and the future. I would just slightly caution against the way in which the Conservatives sometimes represent some of the data in terms of scores in international terms. Our scores have been slipping. We've actually been going backwards. And I want to see real progress where it comes to high standards in our schools. It was the last Labour government, for example, that started the process of phonics and had a real push around reading. The Conservatives then continued with that and rolled it out, and I support that. But I want to see a similar push where it comes to early maths, because too many of our children leave primary school without getting a good standard of maths, and that holds them back into secondary school and beyond. And that takes us, I think, back to Martin's point about underachievement and about making sure that young people have the opportunities to succeed. And a firm foundation in maths is central to so many jobs and opportunities and apprenticeships.
OK, Bridget Phillipson, Shadow Education Secretary, thank you very much for joining us on the show and being so forthright in your response. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Olivia, let's just pick over a little bit of that. It's one of the biggest jobs in all of government, you know, barring some sort of miracle. Bridget Phillipson is going to get it. Were you convinced by what she had to say? And I pushed her on this education stuff because the working classes in Britain, they just seem to have been forgotten in this master plan of inclusivity, of diversity, of getting more foreign students, and they just need a voice. Do you think that the Labour Party have got the guts to tackle it?
I thought that was a really interesting question. And actually, I've been quite surprised generally throughout this election campaign, and really in both of the manifestos, perhaps particularly Labour's, schools and education don't seem to have been talked about very much at all. And actually, as I was just saying there, education, with school education in particular, is one of the areas that actually you can see that the Conservatives have made some progress. Yes, obviously, which Bridget Phillipson referred to there, COVID and lockdown mean that schools all over the world, reading standards have been slipping. But Britain has been going up, England has been going up in the international rankings year after year. And that a large part of that is because of the reforms which Michael Gove started when he was Education Secretary back in the earliest years of this Conservative government. Now, I asked Bridget Phillipson there whether she would intend to undo some of those reforms that the Conservatives put in place, which do seem to be working. And I thought it was a bit worrying that she said that, well, yes, she would be looking at doing a big curriculum overview. The curriculum seems to be much better than it was when, according to the international rankings, when the Conservatives first came into power. So I think that could be a bit of a worry for parents up and down the UK.
OK, let's get back onto the wider manifesto launch today. Chris Hope, of course, was at that, and he was asking some of the questions about the detail that wasn't in today's manifesto.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Chris Hope there asked a cheeky little double question, the first part of which was about the talking point that the Conservatives have brought up about the potential for this to be a sort of one-party race, a one-party socialist state. Let's have a listen to what Sir Keir had to say.
Chris at GB News.
Chris Hope, GB News. Keir Starmer, you're so far ahead in the polls. Should we prepare for a one-party socialist state, as the Tories say? And is that a good thing? And also, just quickly, you want to reduce net migration. What on earth does that mean? Is that below 100,000 a year?
Look, Chris, let's reject the cynicism of the Tory campaign. All they want to do in a general election is to suppress the vote. I know that not a single vote has been cast in this election. Polls don't predict the future, and every single vote has to be earned. And we will earn it with our plan for growth, our plan for creation of wealth in the future.
So that question on the Labour Party's immigration targets, it was squeezed on the end there, wasn't answered the first time round, but to be fair, Sir Keir Starmer did return to it later on. Let's hear.
We do need to have lower immigration. As you know, immigration is at pretty much the highest on record, bar the number just a few months ago. So this government has lost control of immigration. It's important to look at the reasons for that. And the main driving reason is because they haven't got any skills strategy. We haven't got the skills that we need in this country. And that's why not only is our plan here a plan for growth, it will also deal with immigration, because this government has gone to immigration as their growth lever. I want to go to skills, wealth creation, investing in businesses in this country. Thank you.
See, Olivia, that will have people pulling their hair out, because we specifically asked, is it tens of thousands? Is it going to be one in, one out? And there was no detail. Is that a sign of things to come under Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, he's absolutely got the rhetoric nailed there. That's going to the music to the ears of people up and down the country who are worried about immigration. He says there that this government has turned to immigration. We will turn to upskilling people. Well, yes, that's all very well, but he refused to put a number on it. And I think that's what a lot of people would like to know. Yes, immigration last year was the highest it's ever been at something like 700,000. What would Sir Keir's Labour Party want it to be like in 5 years' time? We just have no idea.
We put it to him, and he was, I think, especially vague. Olivia Utley, thank you very much. Can't accuse you of the same thing. Superb stuff. Now, moving on, it's time for the Great British Giveaway now, and your chance to make this summer really special with over £16,000 worth of prizes to be grabbed. That's 15 grand cash, tax-free, and a whole host of goodies on top. Now, you've got to be in it to win it. Here's all the details that you need.
We're making this summer funner. with 3 incredible prizes to be won. First, a fantastic £15,000 in tax-free cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, there's the latest iPhone 15 with a brand new set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. The summer fun could be on us. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
So coming up, we'll be discussing Nigel Farage after he has said that he would be willing to lead a merged Reform Conservative party and predicts that a new party is likely to emerge after the next general election. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today we've got 2 fantastic individuals who have invented a teddy bear to help children who are suffering with mental health.
Yes, so Lynn and Samantha Crilly came up with the idea for the Trouble Muncher toy following Samantha's own battle with an eating disorder and OCD.
Yes, the teddy comes with a notepad and encourages its owners to write down what's troubling them, and then they can pop the note into the rucksack on the bear's back.
I struggled with mental health most of my life, actually, and oh no, it's fine. I've got one. I feel quite sorry for you. But and one thing I always did was message my mum, and it was a thought disassociation kind of technique. I would message you. Even now, I message you thoughts that come into my mind, but massively when I was younger. And I thought, what happens if you're younger and you don't have this?
Yeah, and I think in today's technology-fueled world, I think we go back to basics, and it just helps them to process by writing it down. Everything's so instant these days.
So it's like an indirect way of telling your parents how you're feeling, what you're going through. Such a great idea. What's the feedback been from parents who have got a Trouble Muncher for their kids? What you got any stories?
It's been really good. In one household, he sits on the kitchen side, and I think during the day, the parents, the children put their worries in, or at night, and then they know that their parents will look at it during the day. And it's gone into some schools as well.
You'd imagine you'd want one of these Trouble Munchers in every classroom and in every school up and down the country, because children who are being bullied, for example, who feel like they can't tell their parents, they're too embarrassed to talk about it. This is such an important tool, isn't it, for children to communicate that?
Yeah, well, you were saying Mum's a mental health counsellor, and you had a young child who had Snapchat AI. So you talk to an AI in Snapchat, and that's what they talk to now.
The People's Channel.
Late afternoon treat. Whatever you're celebrating, celebrate with us. For your next event, contact the Thomas Paine Hotel, Thetford.
At City Moves, we pride ourselves on providing a seamless experience, making your move.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 4:25. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, later this hour, I have the latest on the trial of radical preacher Anjem Choudhury. He's charged with directing a terrorist organisation. Nigel Farage said he would be willing to lead a merged Reform Conservative party. Earlier this morning, he said that he could not lead the Tories as it currently is, but predicted a new party is likely to emerge after the next general election. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the GBNews political correspondent Olivia Utley, who's still here from the previous debate, and also the political commentator Alex Armstrong. Alex, let's kick off with you. Is there going to be a deal? In, out, shake it all about. Nigel Farage this morning flashed his garter. Do you think this is the right thing to do?
Well, look, I think if the Reform Party and Nigel and Richard and everyone, all of the, the top dogs in Reform want to ever have a taste of power, this deal has to happen. I think under our current first-past-the-post system, it's highly unlikely Reform will ever form the opposition. Not impossible, but highly unlikely. So I sense that they certainly will want this deal to go ahead, and I think it would be a very good thing because the Tory party has completely lost its way. I mean, you can basically call them the Liberal Democrats at this point. I think amongst voters it would be rather popular because what they're crying out for, this 20% of Tories that have now gone to Reform, they're crying out for conservative values, and the Tory party have lost the majority of their conservative values. It's an oxymoron, the name itself.
Olivia, though, the fact of the matter is that Nigel Farage undeniably has influenced the voters in that base like him. But realistically, they may return 2, 3 MPs. Nigel Farage might be 8th time lucky. Is he really in a position to say that he'll be the future leader, or actually the Conservative Party's been around for centuries? Are they the ones that will call the shots?
Well, I think there is a bit of an element here of a tail-wagging dog. As you say, you could have, yes, the Conservative Party doesn't look like it's going to win a huge amount of seats, but it looks likely to win quite a few multiples of the number of seats that Reform are going to win. I think the other problem with this idea is it would cause splits both on the Tory benches, obviously, and on the Reform benches too. I mean, the Conservatives, as we've seen time and again over this Parliament, are basically split in half between the Brexiteers, the right wing of the party, who do like Nigel Farage and would like to see his influence. Some people like Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary. But then, of course, you've still got this huge collection of One Nation Tories, many of whom are in very safe seats and could well end up keeping their seats. That would cause massive, massive division on the Tory benches. And with Reform too, you've got people who like the idea of making deals with Conservatives, who are friendly with right-wing Conservative MPs, and those who are sort of the hard Brexiteers who say, absolutely not, we can't trust these people. So I think it would reap quite a lot of division.
Well, I don't disagree with you there, Olivia, but I will say this. If Nigel Farage wins his seat, which he looks likely to do from the polls, he would be the most senior influential Conservative on those benches by a long shot. He will be the de facto right-wing Conservative leader, whether we like it or not. He's going to be the man that people look to for the future of conservatism. So it will be up to those One Nation Tories whether they want to come along for the ride or whether they do a Change UK and decide to go on their sort of centre-right own party. But, I really can't see that happening because I think you're going to have big hitters like Suella Braverman possibly retaining her seat. She looks likely that she will. That will also be, highly advocating for Nigel to be part of the party.
Alex, we saw last week a huge swing towards the right of policies across the European bloc, particularly in France and in Italy, a rejection of net zero, a rejection of immigration policies, and yet it looks most likely, bar a miracle, we're about to elect Sir Keir Starmer, who disagrees with all of that. Is that a barrier to this kind of movement, or actually is that a vacuum and an opportunity?
Oh, it's a complete opportunity. I mean, we've seen the Greens in Europe go I don't know how many seats they went down by, but it was relatively substantial. It's substantial enough for people to say, OK, we might need to have a look at these green policies and our net zero policies going forward. But I will say that as Labour won't have a lot of money to play with, I think they're going to play with a lot of social policies in the next Parliament when they're leading. They're also going to have a massive majority, which means the biggest enemy is going to be themselves. That is the time for the right to unite and get behind someone like Nigel Farage, a strong leader who can take the fight to Keir Starmer quite eloquently in the Commons, in my opinion.
And yet, Olivia Utley, there will be a rump of Conservatives, and let's see what's left after this incoming forest fire, if we're to believe, what green shoots will come. What if the rump of those who are left, literally the remainers of the Tory party are those Remainers that can't stand the sight of Nigel Farage. Will they really want to do a deal with him?
Well, I think that is the sort of great unknown. Which Conservative MPs will be left after the forest fire, as you call it? I mean, you could end up with the kind of hard Brexiteers sort of leading the Conservative Party, and then perhaps there could be a deal with someone like Nigel Farage. But if there's any sort of big proportion of that party is made up of one nationers, then the idea that Nigel Farage is the man to unite the right does seem a little bit fanciful from where I'm sitting.
Well, he did say that he'd spice up this election campaign, and certainly, whatever you think, that seems to have happened. Alex Armstrong, Olivia Utley, superb debate. Thank you very much, as ever. Now, still loads more to come between now and 5 o'clock. Across live to my hometown of Nottingham on a very emotional day because, of course, it's the first anniversary of the brutal killings of 3 people by Valdo Calican. I'll speak to the editor of the local newspaper to see have we learned any lessons or actually things got worse. But first, it's time for your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Rishi Sunak says Labour's election manifesto will mean the highest taxes in history. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled his party's key policies earlier today, identifying wealth creation as the #1 priority and ruling out a return to austerity. After he was briefly interrupted by a protester, Sir Keir rejected the Prime Minister's suggestion of higher taxes, insisting there would be no new rises under a Labour government. The Liberal Democrats described Labour's manifesto as a gamble on economic growth that fails to set out how wealth will be shared more evenly. Sir Ed Davey was taking part in an assault course near Royal Tunbridge Wells in Kent this afternoon. He said that trickle-down economics will not fix broken Britain and more investment is needed in social care. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak left the campaign trail today to join world leaders at a meeting of G7 nations in southern Italy. US President Joe Biden is urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and encourage the Hamas terror group to accept a proposal backed by Israel. Leaders of the world's richest economies are also discussing the growing threat posed by Iran and funding for Ukraine in its war against Russia. And the family of Harry Dunn have accused the US government of obstructing their son's inquest. The teenager was killed in 2019 when his motorcycle collided with a car driving on the wrong side of the road. The driver, Anne Sekulas, who was an employee of the US government, wasn't present at the 4-day inquest, nor were there any representatives of the US Embassy. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Don't forget, this is your show just as much as it is mine. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out some of the best comments before the end of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Glasgow. Westbound M8 at the Craighall turn-off junction 16. A lane shut for a breakdown. It's causing congestion. Still very slow west on the M62 around junction 23. The Huddersfield turn-off follows an earlier bump there. Just one lane open around Stafford on the northbound side of the M6. 13 up to junction 14. A queue back to 11A. That's due to a collision. Now in Leicestershire, the westbound A50 Long Eaton to Derby junction 1 to 2 closed and long queues for a multi-vehicle bump there between the Stutterton roundabout and Algakirk. Now that is the A16 in Lincolnshire, shut at the scene of a bump there, and still queuing for the earlier police incident coastbound for the M20 Leeds Castle at 8, still slow through towards Ashford at junction 9. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing we've got is obviously D-Day, which was so moving that I think everybody was crying. You see these wonderful old people who gave their lives, and they were crying to remember it all. You see tears in the King's eyes. You saw Camilla, the Queen, crying. And I think, gosh, you know, actually Britain's maybe opening up, and we're not sort of stiff upper lip all the time anymore. I think that William was so dignified.
Oh, he's amazing, isn't he?
And he was the young king. And I thought he was brilliant. He must have been heartbroken that he couldn't have his wife with him. And one of the people who knocks us on the head now and then is Harry. He got the green light to appeal to the appeal. It's a third one, and he wants to make sure that the government gives him protection all the time, automatically. One of the reasons is that he's going away with Meghan for a tour, world tour, which made my heart sort of pump, because this is going to be another copy of what the royal family is like. And he wants to be covered. Well, it's not on our tax, frankly.
So we, the British public, would pay for this?
Yes, yes. It's a joke, isn't it? And he also said he wanted it all done by the end of the month, June, and the judge said he doesn't deserve that. He is not in that VIP category. So he was sort of put in his place, but I don't think he can believe that. And the other thing is the wonderful wedding yesterday. And one of the things I loved, there was a wedding dress, but also I loved the blue velvet shoes. William again was wonderful.
Yeah.
He was absolutely wonderful. He was ushering everyone around, which seems funny for an heir to the throne, and actually would jump in the bus that was taking them to the celebration.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 4:37. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll tell you why England's most patriotic estate is feeling the pinch ahead of Euro 2024, which kicks off, of course, tomorrow. Now to what is an incredibly emotional day in my home city of Nottingham. It's the first anniversary today of the killings of the students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar and the school caretaker Ian Coates. Earlier today, families and friends of the victims laid roses where the two students were killed. And GB News had exclusive footage of the moment when Varro Callacane was arrested a year ago today. The families have issued a statement this week saying they still believe Callacane should have been tried for murder rather than being given an indefinite hospital order for manslaughter and 3 attempted murders. Well, joining me now is the editor of Nottingham Live, Natalie Fay. Natalie, welcome to the show. It's always a delight to have you on. It's a shame it's under such sad circumstances, and yet, Natalie, we must look back not only to remember that terrible day, but also I wanted to ask you, what's the mood in the city? We were told at the time we must learn from this. The police itself was subsequently put into special measures. Many questions were asked of the mental health services in the city of Nottingham. Natalie, you edit the local website, the paper there. You've got your finger on the pulse. Have any lessons been learned from that terrible day a year ago today?
Well, I think it won't surprise you to hear from me that no, lessons have not been learnt. In fact, I'd probably go so far as to say the situation's got worse. I was going through all the investigations and the reviews that are going on at the moment before I came on here. I've got 2 pages of notes. And, you know, I'm not going to bore you with all the names of them all because there are so many going on. But it's that kind of, you know, will we get any answers? Well, we're not going to get any at the moment, that's for sure. The police are being investigated, the mental health services are being investigated. The IOPC, which is the police watchdog, told us this week they're nowhere near concluding their investigations into potential failings Nottinghamshire police might have committed, and Leicestershire police as well. So it's very much ongoing. And plus the fact you mentioned there that Nottinghamshire police are now in special measures. So in terms of the kind of wider community feel about things, there's a massive mistrust of the police. And in some quarters, a quite intense dislike of them as well, because they were picked up for not treating victims properly and investigating crimes properly. So that is a massive problem in a community. Police, their authority comes from trust from the community, doesn't it? That's how they can carry on how they want to, because otherwise there'll be riots, all that kind of thing. I'm not saying we're close to that at all. But if people don't trust the police and that they can properly look after them when they need them most, where do we go from there? I mean, I've got ideas, and Emma Webber, who is the mum of Barnaby, you can see in that footage there, that was their last moments there. She's actually said on the record, Kate Maynell, Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire Police, it's time for her to step aside. And, for her to say that, I would agree with her. The police have lost trust. They've got potential failings sitting on their shoulders from how they didn't capture Kalakani when they should have done. There was a warrant for his arrest 9 months before the killing. They're in special measures. Where can they go from here? It's time for somebody fresh to come in, I think.
And Natalie, the last time we spoke, I was very moved by a piece that you'd written talking about how citizens of Nottingham no longer feel safe on the streets. And then we spoke again where there was a couple of young lads who were jailed. There's a machete fight in broad daylight at the bottom of Hockley there. These are streets I grew up on. These are streets I'm very, very familiar with. Natalie, it gives me intense sadness to see this kind of activity going on in the city of Nottingham. And clearly your readers, your viewers, they agree with you. Surely what people want, Natalie, is a more robust police service. People want to feel safe. They want to feel they can go about their business as ordinary, hard-working citizens, taxpayers, respectable people, without this shadow hanging over them. And yet, Natalie, it seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've spoken before about how Nottingham just has this feeling of not being safe anymore. And it's all about that perception, isn't it, of how safe you feel when you're walking around. And things like this make people feel less safe. And if they think the police force is not going to be there to help them when they need them the most, it's very, very worrying. So, I think it is time for a change here, absolutely. But you were talking there about taxpayers, working people, wanting to feel safe. But we mustn't also forget the massive student community we've got here in Nottingham, who, of course, is supported by taxpayers. That is going to be, I don't know what the university's particular thoughts on these incidents are, but I can imagine it doesn't look very good for potential students coming to the city. Overall, Nottingham is very safe. Obviously, this was a one-off. Things like this don't happen all the time, but it's about the feeling, isn't it? Because students are out in the early hours. They might be in small groups, they might be by themselves. I've been a student in a big city myself, and you do sometimes walk home in the early hours of the morning. So it might be the case that parents are going, well, maybe we should think about a different city, It's that kind of thing. And it must have impacted on the student community, and I really feel for them, because we should be protecting them as well.
And Natalie, there was a very moving, one of the things that's been the most incredibly moving about this entire episode was the victim impact statements from the family who lost people on that fateful day 1 year ago today. And today, Lee Coates, he's one of the sons of Ian, he was saying, I was getting, I don't know if you call it PTSD, but I closed my eyes and all I could envision was what happened that night. And Natalie, is that feeling of the inability to move on from this in many senses, because there's still a feeling across all of Britain, but especially perhaps in Nottingham, that justice wasn't really served. This guy should have been tried for murder. There's a feeling that he got away with stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. And I don't think the family should move on yet. They haven't got the answers to the questions they've posed. So it's quite right that they keep going. I mean, we've seen a bit of a pause today in their campaigning because they've taken the time to remember their loved ones. They've been at the university for a vigil. The Coates family were at the school where Ian Coates worked, having a private memorial service there. There was a massive student group with the O'Malley Kumars and the Webbers who went to lay flowers in Ilkeston Road this morning. So they have had a bit of a pause, but we've got to know the families very well over the last year. And Emma Webber in particular, she's an absolute tower of strength. She won't stop until she gets the answers that all the families deserve. And we completely admire her for that, because they need to keep going. And I feel in a way they're doing this on behalf of so many other people as well, because We've heard about the police potential failings, but also there's potential failings of the mental health services. That is something we're seeing across the whole country. We've started going to more inquests where people have been potentially failed by mental health services. We've had whistleblowers coming forward. We've been threatened with legal letters over it. And it's always the same themes coming through: staff shortages, overstretched, not enough resource. So, you know, Emma Webber, she's doing a fantastic job and she should keep going.
I absolutely agree. It's been inspirational, and so often in those darkest hours, you know, goodness can come out of it, at least in that sort of trueness of spirit to carry on. And thank you for the work that you do, Natalie Fay, shining a light on this. And, you know, please reach out to me. Anything you want to get out there on the media, I'd be delighted to help, because I'm from Nottingham. I'll be at Nottingham in the weekend, see my dad for Father's Day. I'll be in the Bell Inn, my usual haunt. And, you know, I just love the city, and it really breaks my heart to reflect on what's happened to it. Natalie, thank you very much. I'm getting emotional here. Thank you very much. Now, don't go anywhere, because coming up, we'll be discussing bad news for our armed forces, as over 3,000 personnel have been caught using cocaine in the past years. And I'll speak with a veteran, a very special veteran, for his thoughts. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update here on GB News. From the Met Office, wet weather is spreading its way across most areas today. Pretty gusty too, especially so in the west. And here's the reason why: low pressure ambling in from the Atlantic. The isobars really squeezing together across Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest gusts are. The rain is tracking east. Parts of eastern England still dry at the moment, but the rain will move in here through this evening, and eventually, maybe not till after dark, we'll see that rain cropping up in northern Scotland too. Elsewhere, it should turn a little drier as we go through the second half of the night, and it's going to be a much milder night than recent nights. Temperatures in towns and cities holding up in double figures. It is, though, going to be a bit of a wet start to Friday across northern Scotland, so a very different day to come here compared to today. Soggy conditions, pretty brisk easterly wind as well. Showers packing into western parts of Scotland. The southeast of Scotland may well start dry and bright with some sunshine. Mixture of sunshine and showers to come for Northern Ireland during Friday, and plenty more showers to come across northern England and Wales as well. But a good part of the Midlands and eastern England should start Friday dry and, as I said, quite a bit warmer than recent mornings. Still quite breezy along the south coast, and as we go through the morning, the clouds will bubble up and the showers will get going. One of those days where 1 minute you're caught in a heavy downpour, the next minute the sun is out. So a really changeable day. The brisk breeze means the showers should zip along, but they will be quite heavy when they do come along. Between the showers, though, quite a bit of sunshine and temperatures creeping up a little bit, back closer to the average for June, maybe up to 20 in one or two places. Still plenty of showers to come and go as we go through Friday evening, so bear that in mind if you're heading out. More wet weather working into Northern Ireland at the same time, all circulating around a big area of low pressure that is sticking around for the weekend. So sunshine at times, lots more heavy showers to come on Saturday and Sunday. Goodbye.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting.
I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Radical preacher Anjem Choudhury took a caretaker role in directing banned terrorist organisation Al-Mujahideen. A trial has heard. He's charged with being a member of a prescribed organisation and with directing a terrorist organisation. Well, our reporter Charlie Peters is at Woolwich Crown Court. Charlie, welcome to the show. Bring us up to speed.
Hi Martin. So 57-year-old Anjem Choudhury was on trial today, the opening of his trial for those 3 charges that you've just read out. That is membership of, directing and encouraging support for a terrorist organisation. That organisation is Al Muhajirun. It was banned by the Home Office in 2010, but they say once he was released from prison after a previous conviction for support for the Islamic State group in 2018, and after his licence conditions expired, he attended and promoted Al Muhajirun in a series of lectures from 2022 to the early parts of 2023. That's the prosecution's case today. And they say that Mr. Choudhury took on a caretaker role of that organisation after its so-called spiritual leader, Omar Bakri, was in prison in Lebanon from 2014 onwards. In that period, that's when Anjem Choudhury stood up to that role. The prosecution said that he had a warped and twisted ideology, but a significant amount of the evidence we heard this morning from the prosecution that ties Mr. Choudhury, they say, to Al Muhajirun is linked to another man on trial, a 29-year-old from Canada, Khaled Hussein. He's described as an ardent follower and supporter of Anjem Choudhury, and they also allege that he was part of a group called the Islamic Thinkers Society. Part of the evidence we heard today was meetings and discussions and voice memos and voice notes captured by undercover officers in North America of voice memos recorded by Mr. Hussein. In one case, he said that Al Muhajirun is the Islamic Thinkers Society, that those organisations, according to the prosecution, are part and parcel of the same organisation. They are the same, using a cloak to cover one from the potential for counter-terrorism legislation. So, a follower and dedicated supporter of Mr. Choudhury, he has denied the accusation that he is a member of a terrorist organisation. Mr. Choudhury has denied all 3 charges, pleading not guilty to membership of, directing and encouraging support for a terrorist organisation. Here at Woolwich Crown Court, the trial continues.
Thank you, Charlie Peters, for that update. Now, in yet more concerning news for our shrinking armed forces, as bosses have caught over 3,000 Army, Navy and RAF personnel using cocaine in the last 5 years, which would be enough to make up 4 combat-ready battalions. And I'm now joined by British Army veteran Simon Weston. Simon, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So is this something we should be concerned about, Simon? Or is this just like ordinary people, this is young lads in dangerous situations blowing off a bit of steam?
No, I think you've got to be very concerned about it. You wouldn't allow anybody to operate machinery with narcotics in the system. People are tested regularly, and certainly racing drivers and pilots are tested because of these opportunities to let yourself down. And with the military, you know, we're looking at people who are going to have weapons, they're going to have explosives, and they have to go and do a very serious job. I do see that this falls into the problem that you have with the national service potential, because if it's something that young people are doing on a regular basis, but if you want to not join the military and become part of the national service, well, it's easy enough to take something and fail the medical. But, you know, all these service personnel know that it's highly likely that they will be tested when they come off leave. These things they're not new as well. You know, some of these things happened back in my day, where people had come off a weekend and they'd been smoking marijuana or cannabis or whatever it is they were doing, and they got caught and they got instantly dismissed. And I don't know whether they've dismissed all these people they found with cocaine, but, you know, it's really alarming. And you've got to be super fit in the military. And we know cocaine causes all sorts of heart problems and blocked and damaged vessels and you know, blood vessels and veins and such like, you know. So there's going to be a lot of problems surrounding all of this because we don't know what this stuff is cut with either. So that's going to have its own difficulties.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. It's always a pleasure to have you on, Simon Weston. We'll catch you another time and get a bit more time with you. Now, don't go anywhere because I'll be going through Labour's Manifesto pledges. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now's your weather with Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar.
sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update here on GB News. From the Met Office, wet weather is spreading its way across most areas today. Pretty gusty too, especially so in the west. And here's the reason why: low pressure ambling in from the Atlantic. The isobars really squeezing together across Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest gusts are. The rain is tracking east. Parts of eastern England still dry at the moment, but the rain will move in here through this evening, and eventually, maybe not till after dark, we'll see that rain cropping up in northern Scotland too. Elsewhere, it should turn a little drier as we go through the second half of the night, and it's going to be a much milder night than recent nights. Temperatures in towns and cities holding up in double figures. It is, though, going to be a bit of a wet start to Friday across northern Scotland, so a very different day to come here compared to today. Soggy conditions, pretty brisk easterly wind as well. Showers packing into western parts of Scotland. The southeast of Scotland may well start dry and bright with some sunshine. Mixture of sunshine and showers to come for Northern Ireland during Friday, and plenty more showers to come across northern England and Wales as well. But a good part of the Midlands and eastern England should start Friday dry and, as I said, quite a bit warmer than recent mornings. Still quite breezy along the south coast, and as we go through the morning, the clouds will bubble up and the showers will get going. One of those days where 1 minute you're caught in a heavy downpour, the next minute the sun is out. So a really changeable day. The brisk breeze means the showers should zip along, but they will be quite heavy when they do come along. Between the showers, though, quite a bit of sunshine and temperatures creeping up a little bit, back closer to the average for June, maybe up to 20 in one or two places. Still plenty of showers to come and go as we go through Friday evening, so bear that in mind if you're heading out. More wet weather working into Northern Ireland at the same time, all circulating around a big area of low pressure that is sticking around for the weekend. So sunshine at times, lots more heavy showers to come on Saturday and Sunday. Goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. There's still queues in Glasgow for the westbound M8, Provan to Fruit Markets Junction 13 to 14. It follows that earlier bumper to all lanes are back open. Still queuing for the earlier collision 2 on the westbound M62. It's slow going just past Huddersfield at Junction 23. Now, there's still 3 lanes coned off on the northbound M6, Stafford South 13 up to Stafford North at 14. The queues back to the M6 toll interchange at 11A. It's due to an earlier bump there. Leicestershire, the westbound A50 shut Junction 1 to 2, along Eton towards Derby and queuing. That's for an earlier bump as well. And there's now a lane shut in Hampshire on the eastbound M27, Junctions 5 to 7, that's Southampton Airport towards Hedge End. We're seeing queues there. It's all due to a breakdown. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're making this summer funner, with 3 incredible prizes to be won. First, a fantastic £15,000 in tax-free cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, there's the latest iPhone 15 with a brand new set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. The summer fun could be on us. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's midday. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the Halls of Westminster all across the UK. Coming up, an angry Sir Keir Starmer has criticised people who laughed when he said his late father was a toolmaker. Live on television yesterday evening, Sir Keir has told GB News that his father would have turned in his grave after being disrespected in such a manner. Next, find out why England's most patriotic estate is feeling the pinch ahead of Euro 2024. Apparently the flags are costing too much. And here's a sight for sore eyes, or is it? Because Sir Ed Davey was given a makeover live on television this morning. I think it looks like Hannibal Lecter. But stay tuned for the full embarrassing story. And that's all coming between now and 6 o'clock. So, I mean, there can't be anybody in Britain who doesn't know that Sir Keir Starmer's father worked as a toolmaker. But last night, people laughed in the audience when he mentioned it. Well, Chris Hope, our political editor, has sat down with Sir Keir Starmer today and put that to him. We've got a full interview coming up after this, including reaction to the manifesto and key questions that were missing from the manifesto that we've asked him exclusively on your behalf. What are your immigration targets? Can we trust the Labour Party on immigration? These are the things that people out there watching want to know, and we ask them to Sir Keir Starmer. Get in touch the usual ways. Post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. But first, it's your headlines, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. Rishi Sunak says Labour's election manifesto will mean the highest taxes in history. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled his party's key policies earlier, identifying wealth creation as the #1 priority and ruling out a return to austerity. After he was briefly interrupted by protesters, Sir Keir rejected Rishi Sunak's allegations of higher taxes, insisting there would be no new rises under a Labour government other than those in their manifesto. He's also told members of the public in Crewe that Britain will do better under Labour.
It is a manifesto that rejects fundamentally the proposition that Britain can't do better than this, that we have to go on in the way we've been going on in the last 14 years. It is a rejection of that. Britain can do better, Britain will do better, and with our manifesto and a mandate for a Labour government, we will take our country forward, and that will be felt in every community across the country.
But Chief Secretary to the Treasury Laura Trott said Labour's numbers would mean higher taxes.
This is Labour's tax trap manifesto. It only contains tax rises, no tax cuts. Under Labour's own published figures, it will take the tax burden to levels never seen before in this country. And that doesn't even include the £2,000 of taxes which they're going to levy on every working family across the country. So it's not actually so much what is in this manifesto, is what's not in this manifesto, because Labour have not ruled out taxing your home, your car, your pension. Everyone at home needs to be very, very clear. Their taxes will rise under Labour.
The Liberal Democrats described Labour's manifesto as a gamble on economic growth that fails to set out how wealth will be shared more evenly. Sir Ed Davey was taking part in an assault course near Royal Tunbridge Wells in Kent this afternoon. He said that trickle-down economics will not fix broken Britain, and only his party has a plan to revive the NHS.
Need to have serious investment in health and care. We're suggesting £9 billion of investment to rescue our NHS, and we're talking about investment to help the poorest in our society. And we want to make sure that we've got the capital investment, in social homes, in the fight against climate change, and making sure the nature crisis is dealt with. So we have an ambitious policy package in the Liberal Democrats, and on top of that, we're the only party saying we need to reform our politics. The political system in our country is broken, and it's only the Liberal Democrats who are saying how we would fix that.
All G7 countries have agreed to continue funding a loan package for Ukraine worth nearly £40 billion. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the funds would be backed by proceeds from immobilised Russian assets. Rishi Sunak left the election campaign trail today to join world leaders at the meeting in southern Italy. US President Joe Biden's also urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and encourage the Hamas terror group to accept a proposal backed by Israel. US journalist Evan Gershkovich will stand trial in Russia after investigators said he'd collected information for the CIA. The Wall Street Journal reporter has been detained since March last year on charges of espionage. Prosecutors allege that he was caught red-handed trying to obtain military secrets related to tank factory. The White House has rejected the accusations, with President Biden calling his detention totally illegal. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. It's unclear when the trial will take place. The family of Harry Dunn have accused the US government of obstructing their son's inquest. The teenager was killed in 2019 when his motorcycle collided with a car driving on the wrong side of the road. The driver, Anne Sakoulas, who was an employee of the US government, wasn't present at the four-day inquest, nor were there any representatives of the US Embassy. Harry's mother, Charlotte, says her son's memory has been disrespected.
They've further disrespected Harry. They've disrespected the future that he could have had, and it just further bolsters my opinion that they have no regard for myself, my family, our wider family. They just don't care.
A close aide of Rishi Sunak is being investigated after he admitted placing a bet on when the election would take place just days before it was called. Craig Williams served as the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretary. He's also the Conservative candidate for Montgomeryshire and Glendower. He said he had put a flutter on the election date some weeks ago, but doesn't want what he called routine inquiries to distract from the campaign. And a new study has found the final episode of Neighbours caused fans to experience grief. Dr Adam Gerras from the College of Psychology in Adelaide surveyed 1,300 fans of the Australian soap opera. He found people experienced emotions normally associated with the death of a loved one. The series ran for 37 years before it was cancelled, though it's since been revived by Amazon. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now we start with our brand new interview with Sir Keir Starmer, and an angry Sir Keir has said that his father would be turning in his grave at the way that many members of the audience in a televised election event yesterday evening laughed when he said that he had worked in a factory. Now, Sir Keir's father passed away in 2018. Now, the Labour leader has been speaking to our political editor, Chris Hope.
Keir Starmer, is it a risk going to an election saying you're going to increase people's taxes in a cost of living crisis?
We have been very clear that for working people, we are not going to increase their taxes. So that means we are not increasing income tax, national insurance or VAT. And that is because I think the burden on working people is too high. The tax burden under this government is at a 70-year high. And that is why our plans are fully costed, fully funded. They do not involve tax rises over and above the ones that we've set out in relation to non-dom status, private equity, loopholes, VAT on private schools, and of course a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. So they're the rises we will put in place. But we have not announced today anything over and above what we've pre-announced. So none of the plans today in our manifesto for growth, for wealth creation, require us to raise other taxes.
But you're still raising taxes and the Tories are cutting it. There's quite a clear line there for voters, isn't it?
Well, the Tories aren't cutting tax. They've raised it to the highest level for 70 years. They say they're going to cut tax, but they haven't told us how they're going to fund it. That is the mistake that Liz Truss made. Rishi Sunak was supposed to be the sort of guy who came and stabilised after Liz Truss, and now is repeating the mistake. And the reason that matters is not just the political to and fro of a campaign, because working people pay the price. People are today paying more on their mortgage because of what the Tories did to the economy. Rishi Sunak's going to do the same all over again. People can't afford that.
When you say cutting taxes for working people, what is your typical working person who might receive tax cuts under the Labour government?
Well, everybody who's earning an income and paying income tax, paying national insurance, and paying VAT. So those that are, as it were, subject to those three
most
taxes,
people, then?
Well, working people, not everybody, but working people, yes.
You said there's no increase in those areas, but you don't mention wealth taxes, capital gains tax. Some say you're going to double that. Is that the plan?
The whole point of our manifesto is a manifesto for growth, for wealth creation. Everything fully costed, fully funded. This is the complete opposite of the Tory party manifesto, I grant you that. But we've set out, therefore, what it will cost, what the funding is. And as you go through it, as you have done all undoubtedly, you will see that there are no tax rises needed for the plans that we intend to put in place. And I understand why, all of the questions in this campaign so far have been about tax and spend. I reject the argument that that's the only way you can actually take our country forward. Our plan is for growth, for wealth creation, for the simple reason that if we had growth in the last 14 years under this government, at the same rate as we did under the last Labour government, we'd have tens of billions of pounds for our public services without raising
And if growth doesn't happen, like it's not at the moment, then what?
I reject this proposition that's put to me that we've had a lousy 14 years where growth has been basically flatlined and our public services have fallen into disarray, that nothing can ever get better, none of this can change, that's our fate for the future. This is a change election. I confidently put forward a plan which is 4 years in the making, lots of engagement with business and others who will deliver it with us, changing the planning rules, setting up a national wealth fund, setting up GB Energy, getting our waiting list down. These are structural changes that will bring about the growth that we need. This is a change election, and we're going to turn our back on this sort of defeatism that nothing can get better in this country. I do not accept that.
On migration, you very kindly answered a question in that press conference. I did ask you, what's your figure? You want to reduce net migration to what? You wouldn't give a figure. Is it tens of thousands?
I want it to come down substantially. I'm not going to put an arbitrary figure on it. That's been done in pretty well every Conservative manifesto for the last few elections. And the one thing that is common in those manifestos is the number has never been hit. So I'm not going to put an arbitrary figure. I'm going to say the numbers need to come down. They need to come down substantially. They're way higher now than they've been ever before. They need to come down. The way to bring them down is to make sure that the underlying drivers, such as the skills crisis in the country, is dealt with. So that's what we will do.
On Brexit, you say no return to single market, customs union, but you want to be a leading nation in Europe again. What does that mean? Is that some form of backdoor entry?
It means a better deal than the botched deal we've got with the EU, which isn't really working for anyone. So that's improved trading relations, so it makes it easier to trade for our businesses. That'll be very well received. I also want us to work more closely on research and development and education. And the other area that's very important is defence and security, which in light of what's happened in Ukraine is obviously a very pressing issue. And I think that we can have a closer alignment there.
I'm not undermine NATO by doing that.
No.
Because NATO might think that's what we do.
I've talked to NATO about this and how we would work both in NATO and with improvements in security across Europe. I think they would welcome that. We have a very big contribution to make when it comes to defence and security as the UK.
Looking at last night's debate with Sky News, the crowd laughed when you said your dad's a toolmaker. Why is that? Do you think you've got nothing more to say? Are they getting tired of the same comment?
Let me directly address you on that. My dad worked in a factory all his life. He felt people disrespected him.
That's not happening with the laughing.
I do want to see this through because it actually hit a nerve last night. because he felt that in the usual conversation, when someone says, "What do you do for a living?" socially, he would say, "I work in a factory," and there'd be a pause where nobody quite knew what to say. And he felt really disrespected. It caused him in his life to withdraw from social engagements. He didn't do it much later in life because it was raw to him that he should be disrespected because he worked in a factory. So when someone laughed last night, my dad would have turned in his grave.
Was that a bit of snobbishness towards your dad, do you think?
I don't know what caused someone to laugh.
No.
But if you're laughing at someone because they work in a factory, then that is the one thing that I think had a massive impact on someone like my dad, the disrespect. And it's in me. You can see I'm angry about it.
You are
I'm
angry.
frustrated because I will never allow that sort of disrespect for working people to be any part of my plans, any part of the Britain that I want as the future. So I will proudly tell anybody who will listen that my dad worked in a factory. He was a tool maker, very good tool maker. He loved his trade. My mum was a nurse, and she loved being a nurse, and we didn't have a lot of money. And I'm proud of what my parents did. And yes, I don't like it when people laugh at my dad because he worked in a factory.
Quite right. Finally, Vic's not here. The PM's wife was there on Tuesday. Does she not like campaigning? There's a rumour that she's disappeared. She's not there anymore. I mean, not literally, but where is she?
She was working yesterday.
Oh, she's working, OK.
She works in the NHS.
OK. But she's happy about your campaigning, happy about you becoming Prime Minister, maybe?
Yeah, and she's getting on with the job that she's got in the NHS, and that works very well for us. We've also got 2 children. Of course. She's doing a fantastic job with them as well.
OK, fully behind you.
Of course.
Of course. Thank you. Keir Starmer, thank you.
Well, that was a superb interview, and let's speak now with the man who did it, and that's our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. A very insightful, very revealing interview there. And can we start on that point of my dad would have turned in his grave? Do you still think, actually, that Keir Starmer is missing the point here? People aren't laughing at his father. They're not laughing at the laudable, noble job of working in a factory. They're actually laughing at the fact he keeps telling everybody about it all the time. Isn't that the point?
Hi, Martin. Yeah, welcome to Manchester, where shortly we'll be going and looking into more TV debates tonight, a 7-way debate involving spokespeople for the main parties and then Nigel Farage and others for the smaller parties. But yeah, in that interview, when I asked the question, I thought you might understand. I think that people are they're familiar with the toolmaker line. His dad worked in a factory, but no, it's not the case at all for him. He takes it extremely personally, and he says. And who's to argue with him? It's his lived experience of people mocking his dad who worked in a factory, his dad being embarrassed to say he worked in a factory and almost retreating into himself in the back end of his life. And he thinks it's really upsetting and frustrating. And he says in terms there that people in that audience in Sky News last night were mocking his dad for working in a factory. I think that's quite telling. Whatever you say, Martin, we're journalists. We're used to the familiar patter from these politicians, but an audience who isn't maybe that engaged with politics, and he felt they were laughing at someone working in a factory, and he spoke out about that.
Can I quickly ask you about your question on immigration targets? Because people want to see detail. We're 5 minutes to midnight. We're staring down the barrel of an incoming government. We want to know some actual concrete numbers. Chris, you tried your best. You still didn't get any detail out of Keir Starmer.
That's right, Martin. Well, here's the manifesto. Page 41, Labour will reduce net migration. It says it in terms on page 41, and I did it on behalf of you and the viewers and listeners. What does that mean? To what is the answer? Reduce net migration to what? He wouldn't say and didn't say. And I also asked Yvette Cooper in the aftermath of that speech earlier by Keir Starmer at the headquarters of the Cooperative Society when she also wouldn't say it. They know that number, that tens of thousands number that the Tories first produced back in 2010 has been used to beat them up repeatedly over 4 governments, and they're not going to make the same mistake. The problem is, I think, there's a lack of trust, I think, amongst our governing class from people who are concerned, and lots of them are GBNews viewers and listeners. They are concerned about migration figures, and they look at the ruling class and wonder, don't you get it? Give us a figure and let's judge you by that. But even Labour won't do that.
Well, thank you, Chris O, for holding Sir Keir Starmer to account on behalf of GB News viewers and my show. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to speak to you soon, my friend. Excellent stuff. Let's get more reaction to what Sir Keir Starmer said, and I'm joined in the studio by Mark Littlewood, who's the director of the Popular Conservatives. Mark, welcome to the studio. You were making notes profusely there on the economic detail, the taxation detail of Sir Keir Starmer's manifesto. Share it with us, please.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary, really, isn't it? You would think, I'm not politically sympathetic to Keir Starmer. You would think that he would actually have a plan for growth. That's what he says. He wants to bring stability and growth. This seems to be Keir Starmer's analysis of the past decade or so. Credit has been insufficiently cheap. He's complaining about mortgage rates being as high as they are. We have had unbelievably low interest rates, ludicrously low interest rates for 15 years now, getting drunk on cheap credit. Presumably he wants to go back to that. He's worried that interest rates are too high. He criticises the Conservatives that the tax burden is the highest since the 1940s. He is correct, objectively, in that fact. He thinks taxes aren't high enough. It's not high enough for them to be at this level. We need to dial them up a bit more. He didn't mention much about regulation, but we've heard announcements from the Labour Party. They want more advertising bans and all of the rest of it. We get new regulations every day. We've had that, disappointingly, under a Conservative regime. Keir Starmer thinks the country is still regulated too little. So his recipe for growth seems to be to go back to cheap credit, to dial up taxes even higher, even though the highest since the Second World War, for the state to spend even more money and have even more control over the economy, and for regulations to continue to grow. I would be very surprised if that brings about boost to GDP in the UK economy.
And yet, he said, almost like Daubney, nothing on the income tax, no VAT, no money back, no guarantee. Is there a danger here, Mark? People are saying that there's not a lot in this in terms of detail, nothing to spook the horses, but with that supermajority that even Grant Shapps is talking about, could there then be an unstoppable majority to really ratchet up tax increases down the line?
I think that's right. And the odd game that politicians play to try and swerve the very fair questions of people like Chris Hope is they rule out an income tax hike, a VAT hike or something. But there are a million ways in which you can increase the tax burden. So I think GB News viewers should be keeping an eye on one thing. What's the total proportion of national income that the government is hoovering up in tax? That is at a 70, 80-year high. Keir Starmer wants that to go even higher. To my disappointment, it will probably dial up a little bit if the Conservatives are re-elected, unlikely that seems. It will dial up a lot more if Labour is re-elected. They will stick to these particular pledges, but keep your eyes open for capital gains tax, playing around with the thresholds on income tax, introducing new rates. You know what, Martin? It reminds me a little bit of George Bush Sr., who made a pledge before he was elected president in 1988, read my lips, no new taxes. Taxes then went up, and some Republicans dared to say, these aren't new taxes, these are just old taxes going up. That's definitely what we'll face under a Labour government, probably to quite an extent.
Superb analysis, as ever. Thank you very much, Mark Littlewood, who's the director of the Popular Conservatives. Now, Liberal Democrats leader Sir Ed Davey was asked about Labour's manifesto, but it's fair to say he didn't sound too interested in it.
To be honest, I haven't read it. I've been focusing on the Liberal Democrat manifesto. I'm really delighted about how many people seem to like what we're saying on health and care, on the cost of living, on the sewage, and a whole range of issues. We've had a fantastic response to the Liberal Democrat manifesto, and I just hope many people do read that and then recognise that we have the values and ideas to take our country forward, to get the change that we need. Liberal Democrat plans are very ambitious, you're right. There's so much that needs to be put right in our country. We need real change, and that's why we need to have serious investment in health and care. We're suggesting £9 billion of investment to rescue our NHS, and we're talking about investment to help the poorest in our society. And we want to make sure that we've got the capital investment in social homes, in the fight against climate change, and making sure the nature crisis is dealt with. So we have an ambitious policy package in the Liberal Democrats, and on top of that, we're the only party saying we need to reform our politics.
Now, as Davey, you hadn't read the manifesto from the Labour Party. Now, the NHS are seeing increasing numbers of young men requiring treatment after becoming addicted to trading Bitcoin. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Tens of thousands of British troops joined Allied nations storming the beaches of Normandy.
D-Day opened the long-awaited second front, of course, helping to liberate France from Nazi rule. This isn't just a commemoration, is it, of the history, Cameron? It's very much a royal event.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because as we said earlier, the King, and by extension the royal family, has an incredibly important relationship with the armed forces. The King is Colonel-in-Chief, the head of the armed forces, so he knows the sacrifices that these people make. And his grandfather, of course, was monarch during World War II, and he spoke of his grandfather's frustration that he couldn't go across to Normandy on D-Day itself because it was far too dangerous. The British government wouldn't let him. Similarly with Churchill as well. But what he would have done is heard the stories from his grandfather and also his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. So the King and the Queen heard all these harrowing stories. And I think with all of that in mind, when we saw them yesterday in Portsmouth, I think the emotion perhaps overwhelmed the Queen, as we've seen on the front pages this morning. The King looked visibly moved as well. He gave a very heartfelt speech.
And the King and the Queen during the war, Cameron, were incredibly important part of it, because there was a suggestion that the Queen and her children, which had been Princess Margaret and the future Queen, should be moved to Canada, to live in Canada during the war to protect them. And she said, I go where my husband goes. So she stayed in Britain. They stayed in Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace took bombs during the Blitz. There was the famous moment when she went to the East End and said, I can now look you in the eye because the palace had taken bombs too. And the King's broadcasts, they were incredibly important to keep the British morale going.
They absolutely were, and the King did eventually go and visit the Normandy beaches around 10 days after.
The People's Channel.
Stop the silence. Start the conversation. Get in touch.
Here at Gold Reserve Jewellers, we buy and sell gold and silver jewellery. We believe it's best to sell your jewellery face to face, so we can answer any questions you might have about the items you are selling.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:27. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, if you want to see Sir Ed Davey get a makeover live on television, then you're in luck. I'll show you what the Lib Dem leader got up to earlier today. But before that, the NHS are seeing increasing numbers of young men requiring treatment after becoming addicted to trading Bitcoin. Patients are becoming hooked on trying to make money from volatile cryptocurrency markets. And joining me now to discuss this is recovered gambling addict and the author of Tales I Lose, Justin Larkham. Justin, welcome to the show. This perhaps will come as no surprise to you, but I'm particularly interested in why is it that young men in particular seem to be going down the route of video game addiction, porn addiction, gambling on football addiction, and now the latest one, cryptocurrency trading addiction?
I think generally that socioeconomic group are probably thrill seekers. They're people who enjoy risk and reward. And unfortunately now at a very early age, people learn that in those video games that you mentioned. And then it develops into something else. And cryptocurrency, as you say, is very volatile. It's the thrill.
And also what you get, Justin, I see this a lot. I mean, you know, full disclosure, I have a little dabble for a bit of fun on gambling websites, on a bit of football. I'll be on the Euros. I do a little bit of crypto, but I do it as a bit of fun. And it says here that half of people treat it as such. But when does it become a problem? Because I see the adverts all the time luring young men in with the offer of massive fortunes for little output. If it's too good to be true, it often is.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the bookies always win in the end. And that's the problem, really. I guess I'm not anti-gambling. For myself, I would never be able to gamble again. And there's a small percentage of people that go on to have an addiction to gambling, which is horrible. It is really crippling. It's one of the worst addictions I could ever imagine. It destroys relationships. It, unfortunately, in the end, will take people's lives. And an addiction in general is something that we are, for a certain proportion of people, will have a presupposition to gamble. And it's Bitcoin is another example of that.
And just in quickly, Amanda Pritchard, who's the chief executive of NHS England, said we need to take action against these cryptocurrency trading sites because it's the NHS that's picking up the bill. Do you think it's fair that the NHS should be treating gambling addicts? After all, it's a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, and you know what? For a long time, they weren't. It was picked up by a voluntary levy on the industry. It's now become a compulsory levy, and that offsets some of the money that the NHS have to fork out for this. It is a lifestyle choice to start with, but let's be really, really clear. It stops being a lifestyle choice when you go down that slippery slope. And for some people, they will. So there do need to be warning signs around it. I just think there needs to be a little bit more control on this, as there are in other places.
Superb stuff. Thank you for being so forthright. Justin Larkham is the author of Tales I Lose. Thank you very much for your honesty. Much appreciated. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll tell you why England's most patriotic estate is feeling the pinch ahead of Euro 2024, which, of course, kicks off tomorrow. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak says Labour's election manifesto will mean the highest taxes in history. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled his party's key policies earlier, identifying wealth creation as the #1 priority and ruling out a return to austerity. After he was briefly interrupted by a protester, Sir Keir rejected Rishi Sunak's allegations of higher taxes, insisting there would be no new rises under a Labour government other than those in their manifesto. He's told members of the publican crew that Britain will do better under Labour.
It is a manifesto that rejects fundamentally the proposition that Britain can't do better than this, that we have to go on in the way we've been going on in the last 14 years. It is a rejection of that. Britain can do better, Britain will do better, and with our manifesto and a mandate for a Labour government, we will take our country forward, and that will be felt in every community across the country.
All G7 countries have agreed to continue funding a loan package for Ukraine worth nearly £40 billion. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the funds would be backed by proceeds from immobilised Russian assets. Rishi Sunak left the election campaign trail today to join world leaders at the meeting in southern Italy. US President Joe Biden is also urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and encourage the Hamas terror group to accept a proposal backed by Israel. And the family of Harry Dunn have accused the US government of obstructing their son's inquest. The teenager was killed in 2019 when his motorcycle collided with a car driving on the wrong side of the road. The driver, Anne Sekulas, who was an employee of the US government, wasn't present at the 4-day inquest, nor were there any representatives of the US Embassy. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2750 and 1.1863 euros. The price of gold is £1,802 and 47 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed at 8,163 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Loads of you have been getting in touch about Sir Keir Starmer's response to people laughing at him for when he said his dad was a toolmaker on TV last night. If you want to get in touch, then you know you can. gbnews.com/you'll say. That's the best way to do it. I'll read out the best messages before the end of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Now, big problems continue up in North Yorkshire for the A659 at the Wetherby Road. Remains closed through Tadcaster. A fire broke out in a building off the junction at Station Road. Still really slow heading west through Greater Manchester on the M56 to Junction 6 at Hale, where a lorry's broken down in the left lane. Really heavy still heading north up the M6 towards Stafford after a car and a lorry collided just south of the A34. All lanes are back open, but it's queuing all the way back to the M6 toll turn-off. And also in Staffordshire, the D road, so this is the road, of course, into and out of Stoke-on-Trent. It's shut northbound just at the Tunstall turn-off following an accident. And in Essex, the Stanford Road at Stanford Hope closed following an accident just off the A13. And Greater Anglia trains are suspended through Essex from Southminster to Althorn for Operation Winston. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
How prevalent is it in those with darker skin, like me?
That's a great question, and it's one that we get a lot. So your skin tone does affect your risk of skin cancer. People at the most risk are people with lighter skin tones, so light-coloured hair and eyes as well, lots of moles and freckles, a history of sunburn or a family history of skin cancer. But people with darker skin tones can still burn and can still get skin cancer. Anybody can get skin cancer. So I would encourage everybody, regardless of your ethnicity or your skin tone, to think really seriously about taking care when it's sunny. That myth that you've mentioned that black people can't get skin cancer is really prevalent, and that's something I want to dispel right now immediately. Because more black people think maybe they can't get skin cancer, that might mean that when they spot something unusual for them, they're less likely to go to the doctor and they're diagnosed later. And when you're diagnosed later, your outcomes do tend to be worse.
So the figures are disturbing that more people are getting skin cancer. But what about outcomes? I mean, if you do get skin cancer, what are your prospects?
So yeah, like you say, this research is a mixed picture. We're seeing incidence, so the number of new cases going up, which is not good news. But there is some good news in that mortality, so whether you're going to die or not, is actually going down. And we think that's partly due to early diagnosis, which I just mentioned is so important. But also research has led to better and kinder treatments, which mean that outcomes are likely to be better. So now if you're diagnosed at the earliest stage, stage 1, with melanoma, actually around 9 in 10 people will survive their disease for 5 years or more.
The People's Channel.
This Saturday, GB News invites you to witness the pageantry, the tradition and the unity. Join Ellie Costello and me, Andrew Pearce, in a celebration of His Majesty the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour. Saturday at 10 a.m. on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's almost 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, stay tuned to see how social media mocked Rishi Sunak after his sob story that he didn't have Sky TV when he was a kid. It's beautiful stuff. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is back on his battle bus after launching the Labour Manifesto in Greater Manchester this morning. He visited the home of Crewe Alexandra Football Club after setting out his plans, which he claims will rebuild the country after 14 years of Conservative rule. But the Labour leader's speech was briefly interrupted by a protester who claimed his policies were too similar to those of the Tories. You can't keep anybody happy, can you? Now let's cross live now to GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster, who is on that Labour battle bus. Catherine, welcome to the show. Show been a very, very eventful day for the Labour Party. Bring us up to speed.
Yes, it has, and welcome to the battle bus. We've had a bit of an upgrade today, Martin, because previously we've been on the press bus. That's not the branded one. We're on the big red bus. There's been some drivers pooping as we've gone past. We're in quite heavy traffic at the moment. But anyway, so Keir Starmer is at the back. He was talking to our political editor, Christopher Hope, just a little bit earlier, wasn't he? But I've been making my way through this 130-page manifesto. You can see that word. It's really what it's all about. It's very glossy. There he is by the white cliffs of Dover. Also, he managed to get in at the picture of him with Volodymyr Zelensky, which, of course, Rishi Sunak missed that opportunity at the D-Day commemorations, didn't he? But, you know, he was given a rock star reception this lunchtime, because this is a party that does believe that after 14 years they are on the brink of taking power. Sure, they are still cautious, and that's why we saw this manifesto that, to be honest, we've pretty much heard everything that was in it before. There were no rabbits out of the hat. He was asked about that. There were no surprises. Was it perhaps a bit dull? And he said, it's not about rabbits out of hats. We're not, this is not a pantomime. I'm running as a candidate to be Prime Minister, not a candidate to run the circus. He's having none of it. They continuing with this safety first approach now. They're saying that everything is fully costed. The Conservatives, of course, are trying to paint them as the party of tax rises. But according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, their plans are fairly meagre, actually, and in fact less spending than the Conservatives or the Lib Dems, much less than the Lib Dems. Of course, the Lib Dems know that they are not going to be in power, and the Conservatives suspect that they're not going to be in power either. So it is rather different for Labour. I think I've said it before and I'll say it again, the Institute for Fiscal Studies is still saying that neither the Conservatives or the Labour Party are being honest with people about the challenges coming down the line. Whoever's in charge after the next election are possible, either extra borrowing, which the fiscal rules don't currently allow, or bigger tax cuts that they haven't admitted to yet, or quite serious cuts to public services, things like prisons, courts, local government. So they're feeling very optimistic. 3 weeks from now, we will all be going to the polls choosing the next Prime Minister. The man at the back of the bus is feeling quietly confident that it's going to be him.
Catherine Forster, superb stuff. I spend a lot of time at the back of the buses, but that's probably the reason I won't ever be a Prime Minister. Very luxurious bus there. Catherine Forster, thank you for that update live from the Labour Party battle bus. Superb stuff. Now it's time now for the great British giveaway now, and your chance to make this summer really special with over £16,000 worth of prizes up for grabs. And that's 15 grand tax-free cash and a whole host of treats on top. Now you've got to be in it to win it, and here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, don't go anywhere, because up next we'll be discussing how England's most patriotic estate won't be displaying as many flags for the Euros this year due to rising costs of those St George's flags. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update here on GB News. From the Met Office, wet weather is spreading its way across most areas today. Pretty gusty too, especially so in the west. And here's the reason why: low pressure ambling in from the Atlantic. The isobars really squeezing together across Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest gusts are. The rain is tracking east. Parts of eastern England still dry at the moment, but the rain will move in here through this evening, and eventually, maybe not till after dark, we'll see that rain cropping up in northern Scotland too. Elsewhere, it should turn a little drier as we go through the second half of the night, and it's going to be a much milder night than recent nights. Temperatures in towns and cities holding up in double figures. It is, though, going to be a bit of a wet start to Friday across northern Scotland, so a very different day to come here compared to today. Soggy conditions, pretty brisk easterly wind as well. Showers packing into western parts of Scotland. The southeast of Scotland may well start dry and bright with some sunshine. Mixture of sunshine and showers to come for Northern Ireland during Friday, and plenty more showers to come across northern England and Wales as well. But a good part of the Midlands and eastern England should start Friday dry and, as I said, quite a bit warmer than recent mornings. Still quite breezy along the south coast, and as we go through the morning, the clouds will bubble up and the showers will get going. One of those days where 1 minute you're caught in a heavy downpour, the next minute the sun is out. So a really changeable day. The brisk breeze means the showers should zip along, but they will be quite heavy when they do come along. Between the showers, though, quite a bit of sunshine and temperatures creeping up a little bit, back closer to the average for June, maybe up to 20 in one or two places. Still plenty of showers to come and go as we go through Friday evening, so bear that in mind if you're heading out. More wet weather working into Northern Ireland at the same time, all circulating around a big area of low pressure that is sticking around for the weekend. So sunshine at times, lots more heavy showers to come on Saturday and Sunday. Goodbye.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:46. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, let's talk about the UK's most patriotic estate. And the Kirby estate in South London is once again gearing up for England at the Euros and is spectacularly decked out, as you can see, with flags and bunting as the residents of the blocks in Bermondsey show their support for Gareth Southgate's boys, hoping that we can finally bring it home this summer. However, the estate is feeling the pinch this year and sadly won't be putting up quite as many flags as they have done in previous tournaments. Now, viewers can see an image from 2021 on your screen when England reached the final of the Euros. And when they first began the tradition in 2012, the flags cost a mere 33 pence. But now, can you believe it, they cost £3 each. Well, early today, GB News spoke with local resident Chris Dowse.
Some of them we've had to throw in the bin. Over the years, they've taken a bit of a batter in regards to the weather. They get ripped, they wear out, they fade. So over the years, we've been able to top up supply and buy new flags just to make sure we've got enough to cover what we need to do. But we've gone through them this year, and we've thrown quite a few away. I think we've thrown over 100 away so far, maybe more. And what we're doing at the moment, we're just going through what stock we have got and making the best of what we can, realising that by the time we run out of flags, we're not going to be able to do everything we want to do. So we're just going to make sure it looks as good as we can. And maybe normally we have a flag on every single balcony. But this year it's probably not going to be the case, but we'll make it look as nice as we can, as we normally do. Make sure it looks uniformed and stuff. Just such a shame that we can't do what we want to do normally, really. Well, basically, when we first knew we were going to do the entire estate, we looked to see how many flags we could get, because we had some already and we'd done a bulk deal. We managed to get them in bulk for 33p a flag, which was quite we'd done all right there. We had a right touch, to be honest. Then over the years, we've had to keep replenishing stuff, buying new ones, try and do different things. And when we've noticed them creeping up, when we first started, we used to go to the pound shop and there was a pound. And that didn't matter. But when it started to get a little bit serious and we started to do in every single balcony, we wanted to make sure we could get the best deal possible. And the last time we bought them, they were gone up to like £2 a flag, which made us only buy a certain amount. And then this year, they've gone up to £3 minimum. Don't get me wrong, we haven't actually searched if anyone can do us a really good deal for a load in bulk, but even at £2 a flag, £3 a flag, when you're trying to buy over 250, 200 flags, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we just haven't got that.
Now, we know where this is going. Your country needs you, Englanders. If you're sat on a sack of flags or flag manufacturers, if you've got any St George's crosses you don't need, you know what to do. Get them to Chris Dowse, care of the Kirby Estate, Bermondsey, South East London, and do your country a duty. And if that happens, we'll make sure we get that back on TV and give you a shout out. Thank you very much. Now, let's catch up with what Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has been up to once again today, because earlier today, as you can see on your screens, he appeared live on television where he was given a summer makeover by a fashion expert and hosts Kat Deeley and Ben Shepherd. He did appear a little shy at first, but he soon got into the spirit of things. Well, as you can see, he got himself into a new suit and some nice tanned trainers. Well, they're sort of half trainer, half shoe. But things got a little bit more spicy when Sir Ed was given some new sunglasses, and he was also then treated to a nice fedora hat. You can see them going on. The shades are going on, and watch this. This is when he really goes full Hannibal Lecter. Because as far as I'm concerned, that is Hannibal Lecter when he steps off that plane, beg your pardon, bottle of Chianti. Is this really what a political leader should be doing? It's been paddle boards, it's been water slides, it's been on your bike. Now he's on primetime TV in a fashion show, and the highlight of that, which mercifully I've spared you, but look, I've had to witness this pain, so I'm going to share it with you. They said to him, Ed, please can you clench your buttocks? And he looked over his shoulder forlornly and appeared to blow a kiss. Now, I don't think that's acceptable. You know, children could have been watching. And is this really what a political leader should be doing? Or, fair play to the fella, is he showing he's a sport, he's game, he's paddleboarding, he's the world's worst gladiator, plopping into water, despite the fact he's against sewage? But here we are talking about him once again. And it's not just Sir Ed Davey that people have been poking fun at today, because Rishi Sunak revealed this week that his childhood was so unbelievably tough he didn't have Sky TV. Well, of course, it brought the people who use Twitter, or X, as a few people would now like to call it, all together in their attempt to ridicule the Prime Minister. Not in sympathy, of course, but to have a pop at the Prime Minister. Check these out. One person referred to Band Aid with Sting, Bono and Simon Le Bon singing, "And there won't be Sky TV in Winchester this Christmas time," mocking the heck out of him. And moving on, the Prime Minister was mocked up as Oliver Twist, asking, "Please, sir, can I have Sky TV?" And another had an image of a young Rishi Sunak burning a bunch of banknotes, saying he was killing time while waiting for Sky TV to be invented. And finally, the poster for ET was changed to OT, only terrestrial. And there you can see with an old-fashioned analogue remote control in his hand. Isn't it joyous when people come together and mock people in power like this? That is the very best of the internet. Now then, We've had a load of your says coming in. Sir Keir Starmer last night in the Sky debate, he said that his dad was a toolmaker. I mean, I didn't know that. The last Amazonian tribesperson in the world must know Sir Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker. And he said it wasn't funny to Chris Hope earlier. Loads of you have been getting in touch. Mark, Keir doesn't get it. They weren't laughing at his dad. They were laughing at him. Anne, oh, Keir, people weren't laughing at your father. They were laughing at you. You're so predictable. Gordon, they were laughing at him because they knew it was his dad's own factory. But Claire says this: I agree that everyone should be valued, whatever their profession. I won't be voting for Labour, but let's leave off Sir Keir Starmer. And finally, Kenny says Sir Keir Starmer is so out of touch that he doesn't know why people laugh at him when he said, my dad is a toolmaker. We know your dad's a toolmaker. We're laughing because it's so flaming predictable. Now, thank you very much for all of your say today. It's been an action-packed show. Hope you've enjoyed it. That's all from me for now. But, of course, Tubes & Co. is up next. That runs 6 till 7 p.m. Don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. Of course, it's Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30. And then, of course, it's Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. Of course, My Ugly Mush will be back at 3 o'clock tomorrow. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Thank you for joining me today. See you tomorrow. Now it's your weather, and it's Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update here on GB News. From the Met Office, wet weather is spreading its way across most areas today. Pretty gusty too, especially so in the west. And here's the reason why: low pressure ambling in from the Atlantic. The isobars really squeezing together across Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest gusts are. The rain is tracking east. Parts of eastern England still dry at the moment, but the rain will move in here through this evening. And eventually, maybe not till after dark, we'll see that rain cropping up in northern Scotland too. Elsewhere, it should turn a little drier as we go through the second half of the night. And it's going to be a much milder night than recent nights. Temperatures in towns and cities holding up in double figures. It is, though, going to be a bit of a wet start to Friday across northern Scotland, so a very different day to come here compared to today. Soggy conditions, a pretty brisk easterly wind as well. Showers packing into western parts of